Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to the first episode of Off Timin'. As we mentioned during our season one finale of Good Timin', we plan on doing a few shows over the summer break where we discuss different music related topics. And on today's show, we are going to be sharing and discussing some of our personal all time favorite albums. So, me, Riley, and Matt have each written down 10 albums that we love from 10 different bands and artists, minus the Beach Boys, of course, since we talk about them plenty on Good Timin'. And for each album that we share, we're going to talk about why we personally enjoy the record so much, and also just what makes it so great to us. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I think it's going to be a really fun and interesting way for us to kind of share our general music taste, both with each other and also with those of you listening. And hopefully we can help introduce some of you listening to some more great bands and albums. So to kick things off, do either of you guys want to share the first album on your list?
Well, let me just say this before we get started. Riley, you can go first because I know you're really excited. I just want to let the viewers know out there. So for the 10, Riley will be doing it ranked from 10 to 1, I believe. I will just be going basically in the order I discovered them and found them in my life. And I think, Jake, you're just going chronological, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, yep. Riley, if you want to start off.
Uh, it's not necessarily my 10th favorite because we are doing without the Beach Boys, right?
Yes.
So I guess this might make it actually, since I'm also not including a certain album that Matt's going to talk about, this is probably going to be my number 12 in all honesty, but it's usually when I play around summer. It's Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel. It's I think I heard it somewhere. It's called like Let It Be, but actually good. Uh and kind of because I feel like it has that similar, I guess, not necessarily like back to basics because Simon and Garfunkel were always very stripped back, but just pure singer-songwriter like awesomeness. And there's so many great tracks from this, both fast and slow. My favorite track is probably The Only Living Boy in New York, and my second favorite is probably Baby Driver. But it's just incredible songwriting from Paul Simon and incredible backing vocals by Art Garfunkel. But I don't know, it's just a very happy, cozy album, and but also one that I can play when going out for a drive in the summer. So totally recommend this one.
Cool. I will admit I've never really deep dove too much into Simon and Garfunkel, but I do love the hits, so I definitely got to give that one a listen. And I do love the title track. I think the title track is just moving.
Yeah. The title track is awesome. The ballads on this thing are nuts. Like I said, Only Living Boy in New York is very incredible. I really like. It's a very different vocal from Paul Simon. I would probably say it's kind of in many ways, even though it's a deep ballad, it's very not Simon and Garfunkel. But I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. But
No, I mean, you're
it,
saying it's like it doesn't sound like their
yeah,
traditional style. Is kind of
yeah,
what
it's arguably, I guess, the most commercial sounding Simon and Garfunkel album compared to maybe like Parsley, Rosemary Time one, whatever the hell that's called, and Thursday morning like 3 a.m. whatever. I gotta be honest, this is the only album I listen to by them in full
Mhm.
because the other is like kind of a hits fan, so I guess you can call me a fake fan of the group. But I will say this is one I've had on nonstop last summer and one that is already starting to creep up back in my Spotify listens. If you only had to listen to two tracks, I'd say Baby Driver for the fast ones, and I I guess I'd say The Boxer because I feel like even though I like The Only Living Boy in New York, I feel like that one's probably the most famous. Yep, my number 12, because I can't mention two albums because I know Matt wants to mention the other one.
you want me
The
to go
other
next?
one's Beach Boys Today, but if you saw our albums ranking video, you would know that.
You want me to go next?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is one I really fell in love with in middle school. It's Justin Timberlake's Future Sex Love Sounds. This I truly think is one of the greatest pop albums of the 2000s. It kind of helped bring in that kind of like some of that EDM, pop and B stuff into the mainstream. Riley, you will love this. It's a gatefold with him smashing the disco ball in there. I would say the highlights on here for me, of course, the three number one singles, Sexy Back, which doesn't even sound like Justin Timberlake because of all the vocal effects. I think a lot of people were really shocked when they first heard that song. My Love, which I genuinely think is one of the greatest pop songs of the decade, and even Pitchfork thought so. It is just a gorgeous track. And What Goes Around Comes Around was another number one hit. That is an amazing song. And I love one thing I really love about this album is that Justin Timberlake wasn't afraid to make the songs kind of long and have like the different parts with like the interludes and the outros and the coda. Because like what goes around comes around has like the two parts where it's like you have the first part of the song, and you have like you spend your nights alone and you never come home. Other songs I love on here, Love Stoned, great song. I would say Summer Love and Until the End of Time are really, really great. And then Another Song All Over Again, which a lot of people think he kind of wrote that as an apology to Britney Spears after he did Cry Me a River. Production on this is amazing. Some of the lyrics aren't the greatest, but he's never been one much of a wordsmith, like the infamous Losing My Way. Hi, my name is Bob and I work at my job. I make 20 something dollars a day. But I really love this record. I was very upset with him a couple weeks ago because of the DWI, but I thought about it. I'm like, well, I listen to a lot of problematic people, and I really love this record, so I have to name it. So this is one of my favorites, Justin Timberlake's Future Sex Love Sounds.
I really liked What Goes Around Comes Around when you shared that album with me. I thought that was a really good track. So I thought that was great.
It's a great song. And I believe he wrote that about his best friend that got cheated on.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so.
All right, so I guess I will start out my list now. So I'm going in chronological order. So the first album is the Beatles' Abbey Road. This is just a phenomenal album from start to finish. A lot of people would argue that it's their best album. For me, my favorite Beatles albums are honestly pretty neck and neck. It's kind of between this and two other ones, which I'll mention when I get to my honorable mentions. But overall, just an incredible album, incredible production from George Martin, incredible songwriting, and some of the Beatles' all-time greatest songs are on this album, in my opinion. You have Something by George Harrison, which is one of George's greatest songs, one of the best love ballads ever written, in my opinion. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Oh, Darling, with that rocking vocal from Paul, just singing the hell out of it. I've always loved that song a lot. I Want You, She's So Heavy, with that really heavy guitar riff throughout the song. And yes, it is a little long, as I think Matt has mentioned, but it is a really great song, in my opinion. Here Comes the Sun, just incredible. Another one of George's absolute best, and I believe the Beatles' most popular song on Spotify, which I think says something. And then, of course, you have the amazing Abbey Road medley that closes out the album with You Never Give Me Your Money and Golden Slumbers, Carry That Way at the end. That whole run of songs is just absolutely incredible. This is just a phenomenal album, and for me, it's one of the best albums of all time. It's an album that I grew up listening to. Like when I was really young, first getting into the Beatles, I remember playing this album all the time. So these songs have really been a part of my life for a long time. But honestly, just in general, when you compare this to so many other albums, it's hard not to rank this towards the top. It's just an incredible record.
Yeah, I love Abbey Road. Probably I would say it's probably number two for me. I love it. I think enough has been said about it. I think it's a great album. And yeah, great choice.
It's kind of like Pet Sounds, where like if somebody had this in their top 10, like maybe it's not my favorite from the band, but I wouldn't argue it at all. It's that good. It's one of I say the few albums in rock where it is perfectly rated, and I think everybody understands that. Abbey Road, Pet Sounds, Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a classic album, and you really can't argue its greatness. If you try to say that it's shit, you're just fucking wrong.
Well, a lot of critics at the time thought it was not great, but I think that's because they thought it was too inauthentic because of all the Moog and everything. But
it's I would say, and this is coming from somebody who loves Dark Side of the Moon, it is the best produced album of all time. Next to Pet Sounds, but I feel like Pet Sounds is almost more innovative than like it's two sides of the same coin because they're both perfectly produced, but Abbey Road is just top notch. Great sounding too. It's not like today where it's like super muddy. It's like crystal clear, and that's back then's production.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Am I up next?
Yep.
This was actually a tough choice for me because I wanted to get a Paul Weller record in the top 10. I almost went with Sound Effects. And I love all of his stuff with the Jam. But if I want to be honest, what I think is his most consistent and consistent record by him in terms of quality, it's actually the Style Council's Cafe Blue, which I don't have a copy of, but I have the US version of can't think of the name off the top of my head, but in the US they called it the Internationalists. So this isn't the actual album, but this is the closest thing I got. And it was such a weird step for Paul Weller, kind of going from his punky attitude with the Jam to like all this, I guess they call it sophistopop, where it's like jazzy and bluesy, loungy, but for whatever reason, it works so well with Paul Weller. I guess you could kind of arguably call it a blue-eyed soul record, but I guess it's more like a blue-eyed jazz record, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also not jazz. It's like, think of very posh British people in the 80s, like with the beatnik suits and shit, like that. But that being said, it's just a great record. A Gospel actually has a rap in it, and it has Dizzy Heights. I also think it has some of Weller's best guitar work, which is something that is very understated when you talk about his music. Because usually when you think of his guitar work, you just think of the jam where he's like, "Burn, burn it, burn it, burn it." It's actually more like jazzy. It's I guess some of it's like finger style. It's pretty cool. Um, I think this jam stuff is much more popular with like the In the City and sound effects and Happy Together. All of those records are very popular. I feel like this is just such an understated part of his career because a lot of people in Britain, as far as I know the jam, some style council hits, and then solo work. But this album is just it is so different, I think, from the rest of everything else on my list, and it's probably one Jake wouldn't expect from me. Did you expect this one?
I know you're a big fan of his, so I'm not surprised that he's on there. But no, I'm glad that you like that kind of album. I haven't heard it personally, so I do want to give it a listen. It sounds like it might be up my alley.
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, I do like quite a bit of other stuff I've heard from him. I like quite a few of the Style Council hits, like "Shout to the Top" and songs like that. So I'll definitely give this a listen for sure.
Yeah. I did want to say some of the highlights. Hold on. I have to get my notes out. My Ever-Changing Moods. I think Jake probably already knows that one.
Yeah, I do.
It's I think his most McCartney sounding track, so there's probably a reason why Jake likes it. The whole point of No Return has some of his best guitar work period in his entire career. Awesome melody, great hooks. The Paris Match is super moody.
I know that one.
A good one. There's two versions of it. There's one from his the one with I think Walls Come Tumbling Down. Nope, not from that record. But two versions. There's one with Paul Weller on vocals, and then he actually has a guest vocal on this, Tracy Thorn. Dropping Bombs on the White House is like classic swing jazz instrumental. I really rock with it. Matt, I actually think you'd really like this album.
Honestly, based on what you say, I think so too. I love like Blue Eyed Soul. I kind of like some of that jazzy stuff. So definitely I want to give it a listen.
It's like Blue Eyed Soul and jazz meets what is the band name? Steve Levine's group that did
Culture Club.
Yeah, it's like Culture Club meets jazz and blues, and it's really cool.
So it's like Blue Eyed Soul meets New Romantics, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'd love it.
Yeah, that actually sounds really cool because that reminds me of like there's like that one album I bought, that Van Morrison record that had Brown Eyed Girl, and I was like, I just love Brown Eyed Girl, I'm gonna buy it. And I honestly love the whole first song because it was very bluesy, very Blue Eyed Soul, very
that being said, though, I do think that the best songs from the Style Council actually come out of this, not in this album. It's pretty cool, but consistently great album. Absolute 10 out of 10 for me.
Cool. My turn. Cyndi Lauper, She's So Unusual. I think this is one of the great MTV New Wave kind of pop rock records from the era. I think it has a great cover art. I think the back is really great too. This one's also a gatefold, this particular copy. This is the MoFi press. I will say for me, side one on here, I think is one of the greatest side ones ever on an album. Opens with Money Changes Everything, which is a cover of a song by the Brains. She just like rocks it with like, it's just like this great, like kind of like power poppy, kind of punky vibe to it. Then Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which is iconic. She kind of turned that song into like a feminist anthem. A great cover of Prince's When You Were Mine that even Prince really liked, which is saying something. And then, in what my opinion, one of the greatest ballads ever written, Time After Time. Moves Me to Tears. I think is one of the absolute most beautiful songs ever written. Side two, a little bit shakier, but you start off with She Bop, which is a fun song about masturbation. Then another highlight, All Through the Night. Absolutely gorgeous tune. Gets a little shaky with Witness and I'll Kiss You. But I really do like Yeah at the very end. It's kind of like a fun little like Swedish poppy kind of vibe. I think it was written by Swedes. So I really enjoyed this record. I think I really discovered this one when I was maybe about 14 in high school, and I just started high school. And I actually, how I actually got into this record was I went to Goodwill and a guy managed to grab a copy of it before I was able to grab it. So I ended up listening to it and I fell in love with it. And I got the MoFi press now, so it's all good. But I really, really love Cyndi Lauper, She's So Unusual.
All Through the Night is a fantastic song. I love that song.
Yeah, and I believe that was written by Jules Shear, I believe. Because Cyndi Lauper herself, she had to kind of make a lot of concessions with the label and write and take other people's songs. But she did write Time After Time with Rob Hyman of the Hooters. And the Hooters did a lot of the backing tracks on here. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of them. I think they're based out of Philly. So that's one of my favorites. Cyndi Lauper, She's So Unusual.
From the tracks that I know on there, they're very, very well produced albums.
They are. Yeah, it's Rick Sherdoff did all the production on here. It is a really, really well produced album. It's a little dated sounding, but I really love that 80s sound. So I can't.
Yeah.
much.
All right, so the second album on my list, we're going to 1971 for this one. And this is Tapestry by Carole King. I think this is just an absolutely beautiful album. Some of the best like piano-based ballads and just songs in general ever written, in my opinion. Carole King, just an amazing songwriter, of course. There you go, Matt. Thank you.
I'll pick something else, don't worry.
Amazing songwriter. Was writing for many years before this album even came out. For a lot of soul artists, R&B, a lot of different genres. But then she was encouraged to put out an album of her own with her own songs, and I think it's an incredible album. I think its production is really great on it. And I just think these songs are just so beautiful and moving. Some of the highlights for me, I feel The Earth Move, just amazing track. So Far Away, really moving ballad, very kind of melancholic feel to it, but great song. It's Too Late, another really moving song. I just heard that one yesterday when I was in the car, and I was like, oh, God, this is such a good song. Beautiful. You've Got a Friend, which I will say I do prefer her version to James Taylor's version. James's is kind of just for me, but I do really love Carole King's version. I think she sings it with like so much emotion and like soul, and I just think it's really great. And this might be a little bit of a hot take because I know people do like this other version of this song, but I do prefer Carole King's You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman to Aretha Franklin's. I think Aretha does a good vocal on it, but I actually find Carole King's more moving to me. But that's just a personal opinion. But I just think it's a really beautiful track. And yeah, I just think even though she might not be the most technically great like vocalist compared to some of these others like Aretha Franklin, obviously, I just think her voice has so much emotion and just it really moves me. So I think this is just a really great album. And if any of our listeners somehow haven't listened to it yet, I would definitely recommend it. It's just a great listen.
I have it too. It was in my 10, but it's okay. I'll pull something from the honorable mentions. But beautiful record. Great vocals from her. A well-deserved Grammy win for Album of the Year here because they have made some stinker choices, but this was a good one. I've never really listened to Joni Mitchell's Blue, but I feel like I would like this more. I don't know. I never really listened to that because I know a lot of people compare this to Joni Mitchell's Blue. Have you heard that one, Jake?
I have, yes.
You don't like it as much, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't.
I've never really listened to Joni Mitchell outside of a few songs, but I know like they're often compared with each other. But I would have a hard time believing that I'm gonna like that one more than this because I do adore this record. But everything you said, I agree with 100%. Just the vocals are so moving. And it's just like you can hear, like you can feel every word she sings. I don't know if I like her version of Natural Woman better than Aretha's because I really enjoy both of them and they're different takes on the same song. But I definitely much prefer her version. You Got a Friend. James Taylor's almost bores me to tears. I just think it's boring. Hers is much more moving. But yeah, great choice. I agree.
I also love some of the little details on here, like on So Far Away, you can hear like the little like the bass playing in the background during it. I really like that on that
a
song.
Little, like whistle at the end is really pretty.
Yeah, just a really great arrangement on that.
Damn, so much James Taylor hate.
I don't hate James Taylor. I just like her version.
Yeah, I like some songs by James Taylor. So I mean, I don't hate him. I just
he's all right.
Yeah,
Sweet Baby James, right?
My turn.
Yes.
You guys might have seen this coming. Mr. Tambourine Man by the Byrds. This is actually one of the newer albums to push its spot onto my list. But it's one of those ones where you keep listening to it over and over again. It's like, all right, you got to admit how much you actually like it. If there's anything I can appreciate about this album the most is probably Roger McGuinn's guitar work, which is pretty nuts considering that he was more like an Al Jardine in terms he just did folk shit and is like 3 chords, but then he started to learn how to do the 12-string jingle jangle style, as he called it. And there's great guitar work all over this. And it's pretty shocking considering how many covers are actually on this album. Mr. Tambourine Man is obviously a cover of Bob Dylan's version, but this is another one where Bob Dylan's admitted that he's liked the Byrds version more. Yeah, I guess this album has more influence on me than I guess I actually like it, but I can't get over the guitar work by McGuinn. It's a great sounding record. It was produced by Terry Melcher. But there's just some great songs on here. Mr. Tambourine Man's, I think, is one of, if not the best covers of all time. I Feel a Whole Lot Better is kind of proto-punky almost, with the there's just, I think side 1 is one of my favorite sides ever in terms of music. Bells of Remy, Spanish Harlem Incident, You Don't Have to Cry, just some great guitar jangle pop. Great album.
Yeah, I'll definitely take a listen because I still haven't really listened to much Byrds, but I definitely will take a listen. I haven't. I know you can shake your head, but I haven't. But I'm sure I'll like it. You know,
I feel like you'll definitely appreciate it more because this pretty much in the long run is one of those like proto country pop albums. Like without this, you probably wouldn't have What the
Don't even
fuck?
ask where that's coming from. I didn't do anything.
Without this, you probably wouldn't have like. And then I
Eagles.
guess the Birds are one of the big pioneers because there's other albums that they did that inspired it. But like Glenn Campbell's Southern Nights probably wouldn't be a song without this whole album. This,
Or like the Eagles. 'Cause I love the Eagles.
Well,
right,
and not necessarily country here, but I mean Tom Petty was super
right.
influenced by. I mean, he even covered. He covered "I'll Feel a Whole Lot Better" on Full Moon Fever. So
And the guitar work itself also inspired a lot of 80s, not necessarily new wave, but like post-punk. Like New Order is even just inspired by just the guitar sound. It's a
yeah,
very influential album on very different many different ends. And it's one that also influences my guitar work too. So
That's cool. My turn. Let me check
yeah.
this out. Prince's Sign of the Times. I'm a big Prince fan. I think this is his best work. This for me is Prince running the gauntlet of his genius. I think it's one of the greatest double albums ever made. It just kind of shows his startling genius from start to finish. You open with Sign of the Times. That entire song was basically Fairlight samples that he made into a tune about like, things that were going on, the crack epidemic, Space Shuttle Challenger, abortion. Then you go into Play in the Sunshine, which is just a great jam that he's just having a great time. Housequake, which is where he debuts the Camille voice. So he basically like sped up his voice to make it sound like a woman. Housequake is a great dance jam. Ballad of Dorothy Parker, which is basically like has this kind of like muddy sound to it because basically like when they were recording it, like all the power went out. It's a great just tune about Prince meeting this girl in a coffee shop and then they have sex. Starfish and Coffee, I think, is one of the great like 3 or 4 chord jams. It's just this fun little song about just like this quirky girl that you see in school. Slow Love, gorgeously moving ballad, very doo-wop influenced. You Got the Look is a great song he did with Sheena Easton. If I Was Your Girlfriend might be the greatest song on this record. Basically him like exploring and breaking down gender roles. Strange Relationship has a great Indian influence vibe. Also has, in my opinion, one of the best lyrics he ever wrote. Isn't it a shame this ain't a movie? For then you could rewrite my every line. I'll take all the blame, yo baby, I'm sorry, but I didn't like the way you were, so I had to make you mine. Gives me chills every time I listen to it. And then probably I Can Never Take the Place of Your Man, which is a great song. One of those great. You know how there's like songs out there, Jake, where it's like they sound happy, but they're like really emotional lyrics. That's a great one of those songs and has some of Prince's best guitar work. And then finally, Adore, one of the best ballads he ever sang. Absolutely gorgeous tune. This is probably my favorite Prince album. It was Purple Rain for a long time, but as I've gotten older, I've gone to appreciate this more. And I think this is one of the all-time great double albums. Absolutely, 100% recommend this album. Have you ever given it a listen, Jake? Just curious.
Yeah, but it was a while ago, but I did, and I don't remember too many of the tracks clicking with me, but I do have to give it another listen because I know that it is one of his more acclaimed albums, and I also know that I told you that I've been listening to Purple Rain a little bit lately, and some of those tracks have started to grow on me on that album, so I definitely do need to give Sign of the Times another listen.
Which I'm very happy to hear that. I'm very flattered that my write-up would inspire you to take another listen to that album.
Yeah, it was a great write-up too.
Thanks.
All right, so it's on to me then. So my next album on my list is an album by a band that I'm not sure if all of our listeners know, but if you're really into music, you may know their name. This is the #1 record by Big Star. So this album came out in 1972, and if I were to describe its sound, it's pretty much kind of a mix of both power pop, which is a genre I'm very into, and also kind of folk rock, because you have these very kind of folky, more laid back acoustic ballads with really beautiful harmonies on them as well. And really that blend really works for me. I just think this is a really great album from start to finish. Big Star was a band from Tennessee. I believe they were from Memphis. And the 2 main songwriters were Alex Chilton, who was of the Box Tops, and Chris Bell. I believe Chris Bell was responsible for most of the production on this album. And yeah, it's just a really great album, and it's very influential. I know that bands like REM and some of these alternative or indie rock bands are very influenced by the sound on here. There's a quote that I wrote down that some music critic wrote that I thought was interesting. They said that what was remarkable about #1 record in 1972 was that nobody except Big Star and maybe Badfinger and the Raspberries wanted to sound like this. Simple, light pop with sweet harmonies and jangly guitars. And I feel like that pretty much describes it. Some of the highlights on here for me, the Ballad of El Gudo. This is just an absolutely beautiful ballad. If any of our listeners haven't heard of Big Star or haven't heard this album and want a song to start with, listen to this one. It's just absolutely moving and heartbreaking at the same time. It's just a great track. In the Street is a great song. I believe it was the theme song for that 70s show. I think Riley told me that. A great song. 13, beautiful acoustic ballad. I believe it's their most popular song. Very moving lyrics as well. Don't Lie to Me and When My Baby's Beside Me are two really great power pop tracks. If that's kind of the sound that you're looking for, these are definitely the tracks for you. These tracks really rock and I love them. And then another beautiful ballad, Give Me Another Chance. This is another kind of melancholic, kind of sad lyric, but a really beautiful song and just some really just gorgeous harmonies on this one as well, especially towards the end. So this is a really great album that not a lot of people know. Just because this band was never really promoted properly. They never really got the attention that they deserved from the public, but critics love them. And I think that there's good reason for that because I think it's great music. So that's my third album, Big Star, #1 record.
What number are we on? I did
You did 3. You did
that
3.
was
so this would be my number 6, I think.
Yeah. Whatever.
Around this spot is where I would have Matt's choice for an album. So I'm not going to talk about it. And I had to substitute some things. So I'm going to talk about Elvis Costello's This Year's Model. Maybe not my most played Elvis Costello record right now. It usually changes every year, but I can't deny the impact this album had for me. I guess it's like a baby's first punk record, I guess, because maybe punk fans would be like, this is not punk. It's absolutely punk. Elvis Costello is very weird. He was like Buddy Holly meets Sex Pistols and like dead in between. He has he's like the nerd punk. It's glasses, the suit, 5'3", like. But anyways, the actual record it was like my first foray or my first dive into that different sound from listening to 60s pop with the Beatles and the Stones and all that. And it really changed the way I started it was one of those like stepping stone records for me, but at the same time, incredible songwriting. I don't think there's a single bad song on here. Pump It Up has one of the greatest bass lines ever written. I really want to shout out I think it's Bruce Thomas is the bass player. It's either Bruce or Pete Thomas, because one of them is the drummer, one of them is the bass player, and they're doing a great job. Steve Naive on keyboards. Elvis Costello is the reason I got a jazz master. But just incredible songwriting. It has that like punk sound, but also he's adding in those synthesizers and keyboards that were very much popularized in new wave. And he still has that like spunky attitude to him. Great lyrics. I think Elvis Costello is one of the greatest lyric writers. But if you want to get into this album, I'd listen to the songs Pump It Up, This Year's Girl, and depending on the version, I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea.
What do you mean depending? There's a different mix?
There's not a different mix. The US version has, I believe, the beats. I'd have to check. I know it does not. The US version does not have I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea. However, the live version of that song is like when the Beach Boys did Rock and Roll Music Live versus the studio version. Because holy shit, it rips. I'll send it in the group chat later. But it's a great, incredible songwriting. It bridges the gap between punk and new wave. It's very important record to me. This one and his debut, both very great records, but also very different sounding. But this guy kicks Taylor Swift's ass with lyrics.
I want to say that I believe that's his most critically acclaimed record because I always see it very.
Yeah, it's one of, like I said before with Beatles and Abbey Road. It's like it is critically acclaimed for a reason. It's as good as people say it is. Maybe it's not like anybody's like niche favorite. It's not like Love You where like a couple of fans like it, but it's as good as people say it is. And
yeah, I mean,
punk deserves a listen.
Punk meets new wave sounds like right up my alley, so I'll definitely give it a listen.
Yeah, and it came out in '78 too. So it's like I don't want to say it's the first new wave album because I don't think it is, but like it helped popularize the genre.
Yeah.
Then you also have the famous SNL thing with Elvis Costello where he's expected to play a certain song live, and then he didn't, and then he starts doing Radio. That's the US version that has Radio. That's the song. And NBC banned him because he was talking shit about radio programming. So yeah, but give it a listen.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, my turn. Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. Sorry, I was upside down. I think this is his best album by far, even better than Thriller, and I will die on that hill. This was the first one he did with Quincy Jones, and I think this is where you can really see Quincy Jones's brilliance. It is a brilliantly produced record. It has some amazing players on it. I mean, you have people like Louis Johnson on bass. You have John Robinson on drums. You have quite a few great guitar players, and just the tracks on here. And what I love about it is Michael's having a lot of fun. This was my biggest issue I have with some of Michael Jackson's later work, and I don't think anybody in our little group here is a huge Michael Jackson fan, but I think the problem I had with some of Michael Jackson's later stuff, it became too methodical for me. It became too much like, let's try to sell as many copies as possible. Like he was trying to constantly top Thriller. What I love about this is he's having so much fun. And anyone who thinks that disco cannot make a great album, you need to give this a listen. This is a great album from start to finish. Starts with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. Enough said. Rock With You, amazing song. Working Day and Night is a great group. Get On the Floor has got the horns. It's just, you know, you just want to go on the dance floor and have fun. Off the Wall is a great title track. Girlfriend, a cover of the McCartney song. I have to be honest, Jake, I like this one better than McCartney's. I know you would crucify me for that, but I really do. I think Quincy Jones did a great job with it. I can always see your face. She's Out of My Life is a syrupy song, but I think Michael sells it well with his vocal. Like some of those songs are too syrupy for me, but it just kind of almost moves me to tears when he's crying. Can't Help It is a great song. It's a Fallen in Love is a great duet with let me get her name real quick. Who does the duet? Patty Austin. And then Burn This Disco Out. I just think from start to finish, it's a stunning piece of work. I'm sorry, I keep doing it upside down. So one of my favorite Michael Jackson album, a great disco record, a great funk R&B record, highest recommendation from me.
I really love the title track. Yeah, Off the Wall. I think it's an amazing song. And then also, yeah, it's the Fallen in Love. That's kind of a deep cut on there, but that's a really great track. I like that one a lot too.
I haven't gone on the Michael Jackson deep dive yet. I'm honestly excited to because I have heard a lot of his songs. I mean, obviously, you know, Billie Jean, all like the hits, but I feel like there's a lot more underneath that don't get enough credit. I haven't gone down it yet, but I plan on it. Sounds like a good record, though. If you're giving this more praise than Thriller, I feel like I should really start with this one then, especially since this isn't earlier in his timeline.
79. Thriller was 82. I mean, this is often ranked as a top 100 record too, and some people do think it was got a 10 on Pitchfork. I love Thriller. Don't get me wrong. I think Thriller's a great record, but Thriller is dragged a little bit down by The Girl Is Mine, which I think is really stupid. It really is, and I cannot believe that was the lead single. But when Thriller hits, it fucking hits. But this, for me, start to finish, is great. But I know, Jake, you're not a huge fan of this version of Girlfriend, right?
Now, Matt, we're not going to fight about this.
No, I'm just asking because you told me you didn't like that they took a section out.
Yeah, they took out but again though it's in a different style, so I can see why he took that section out. But yeah, again, I'm a big Wings Paul guy. I always have known that version, so that of course I'm gonna have a preference there. But
and that's fair because I've always known this, and I prefer like funk soul-y kind of stuff to soft rock most of the time. That's just my take.
I get that. I get it.
But yeah, so definitely I love that album. So now your turn.
Jake, do you have a Raspberries one coming up?
Wait for the honorable mentions.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
I these other ones in. Yeah. So number 4 for me, speaking of McCartney, since we were just talking about him, we're going to Wings. And this is Venus and Mars from 1975. I know a lot of people consider Band on the Run Wings' best album, and I'm not going to argue against that. I do think there's a good case to be made. I do think that some of their very best songs are on there. Obviously, A Band on the Run and Jet and 1985, a lot of really great songs in there. But for me, I love Venus and Mars just because I think it's like a great band record. Like you can really hear, this really does sound like a great rock and roll band. You have Jimmy McCulloch's really rocking guitar throughout this album. He really rips on guitar. Like that's honestly one of the highlights of this album for me. I think it's a really well-produced album. I think it sounds great. And I also just think that Paul's on the top of his game here in terms of melody. I mean, he's just writing just incredible tracks that are super catchy and just infectious. Some of the highlights on here, the opening tracks, Venus and Mars, Rock Show, which really rocks. Love and Song is a really pretty ballad. Magneto and Titanium Man is a fun song, very fun track. Again, kind of goofy lyrics, but I think that adds to the charm of it. Letting Go, this is a great kind of bluesy rock track that I will admit on Wings Over America, this rips. On here, it's kind of more of just a kind of laid back bluesy track, but I do like both versions. Medicine Jar is a really great song by Jimmy McCulloch. I think this song absolutely rips, and I wish that he had written more songs for Wings because I really do think that like this is a really great track. Unfortunately, Jimmy would pass not too long after. He would stay with Wings for another album or two, and then a few years after leaving, he would pass, unfortunately. But a great track there. Listen to What the Man Said was a #1 hit single from this album. Great track, showing Paul at his melodic best again. And Treat Her Gently, Lonely Old People. This is one of my favorite Paul ballads. I love this song. I know that not a lot of people talk about it, but I just think it's absolutely beautiful. I think the melody is to die for. And yeah, I just really enjoy this album a lot. The one challenging thing with Venus and Mars is that I will say, like, when you compare some of the studio recordings on here to the versions of these songs on Wings Over America, quite a few of the Wings Over America ones, they do rock quite a bit harder on Wings Over America. But I do think that this album, start to finish, is really consistent, and there are some tracks on here that I really like that aren't on Wings Over America. So for that reason, I chose Venus and Mars to represent Wings on my list.
Nice. I actually just recently got that record from the flea market not so long ago, so definitely got to go.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I got it for $5. It's a great deal.
Oh, that's a great deal.
Just got to clean it up.
I don't want to say what my favorite Beatles solo album is because it might spoil something in the future. I do think I told Jake that if I ever needed one McCartney record ever, it would be Wings Over America.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally agree there. It's as much as I like the shit on McCartney, that is maybe one of the best live albums ever made. So
Yeah, it's a great album.
It's a triple album too. Cool
Yeah.
poster. I didn't get one. Freaking bought that record for $15 thinking, hey, I'm gonna get a sweet poster with this, and then it did get in the fucking album.
I mean, for $15 though, that's pretty good. That's like if you
Oh
get
yeah, it's still worth every penny. I just wish I got the fucking poster.
It's like if you get a copy of All Things Must Pass for $15, I wouldn't even expect the poster to be in there. Just getting a copy of All Things Must Pass for $15 is the deal.
You're probably getting disc one, the jam
the
disc,
Apple Jam,
and then nothing else.
You're probably just getting the Apple Jam. Jake's favorite.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. Anybody want to take a guess what my next one is?
Something from Oasis.
It's the new Abnormal by The Strokes.
Okay.
This is the newest album on my list by a long shot. By I'd say about 50 years. No, maybe 40. 30, but still. It's one of those albums where if you gave me a timeline of the best music made each year, and I got to see how music progressed, I would very much believe that this is a rock album from 2021. I feel like this is one of the few records that gives me hope that music can still evolve. Because if you dropped me in 1970 and showed me this album and said this came out in 2022, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. It like actually shows music still growing, still evolving. It has Rick Rubin as producer, and I know he's generally kind of mixed with some artists. I think he does an incredible job here. The synth work and the guitar work fit so perfectly together. It's pretty unreal for me. My favorite track, Adults Are Talking. That's the opener. That's the one that's all over TikTok and shit, but it's one of those tracks that is as good as people say it is. Selfless has some great synth work. Brooklyn Bridge to Chorus has some incredible synth work. Bad Decisions has one of the catchiest guitar riffs I've ever heard. This is like pure hook and not much else. And I think, like I said, it shows music actually evolving in the 2020s. The only other album I could say that shows this is the newer Lemon Twigs release. And I guess some stuff by Billie Eilish, but I don't listen to Billie Eilish, so I can't really say from personal experience. But music is still evolving. It could still get better, believe it or not.
The other one I would maybe make a case for is some Lana Del Rey stuff is pretty good that she's been putting out. She kind of is like similar in that Billie Eilish vein. And some people might say Olivia Rodrigo, though. I don't think she's doing anything particularly inventive, but it's catchy.
Yeah. I would say this shows music evolving, maybe not in the sense of songwriting, but in the sense of the studio being used as an instrument.
Yeah.
Because I don't think any of this stuff could be replicated the same way live, which is the same problem that the Beach Boys had in the 60s with Pet Sounds. And the Beatles in the 60s with Revolver and a lot of that stuff. Like this stuff you can't replicate it live. It's a great studio like instrumentation with the synths, guitars. It's fucking cool. And the production's incredible. It sounds great, especially for an album that I believe was not made analog. And I'm a big like music should be recorded in analog because
I'm not.
I just think it sounds a bit better to the brain, even like so I guess subconsciously, although like I said, like I was trying to say though, Matt, like this one, proof that I guess you could still get a good record from at least like sound wise from like Pro Tools and shit.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it really comes down to the mastering more than anything. So the biggest critique a lot of people have of Rick Rubin, Riley, is that he loves overcompression. Loves the overcompression. Like he did actually another song all over again on here because most of this album is Timbaland and Danger, but he did that one. And so some people like, and I think Justin would say this, he likes to use compression to glue stuff together. And that's what people don't like about Rick Rubin. But it sounds like with this one, especially since you're listening to it on vinyl, that kind of rectifies some of the overcompression that is inherent in a lot of Rubin's work.
Well, even I listen to most of it on streaming, I'll be honest. I just have this because I wanted it. But I would say that it doesn't sound super compressed. You can really, especially I would say on Brooklyn Bridge to Chorus, Ode to the Mets, and even Why Are Sundays So Why Are Sundays So Depressing? By the way, there's not a bad track on here. All 8 out of 10 or higher for me. But you can hear each part pretty clear. It's a very clear sounding record. It sounds great. It's, at least in my opinion, maybe some people disagree, but that record is, I think, what did I say, number 5 for me?
Something like that.
Yeah, in that range, because I can't talk about another one yet.
It's coming.
This one, New Abnormal by The Strokes. Great album.
Okay, so I'm kind of jumping around here. I'm trying to think which one came next. I think I discovered. And I think it was this. This is another one that is usually very highly ranked, but for good reason. Nirvana's Nevermind. I think that this album right here is a great blend of Kurt Cobain's great melodicism with kind of that punky kind of little bit sludgy feel, but it also has like a nice kind of like hookiness to it. And I think a lot of that was thanks to Butch Vig. He did a lot of great production work on this. Smells Like Teen Spirit is iconic, and it does not matter how many times I listen to that song. I will never get sick of it. In Bloom, I think is a great song too. Come As You Are, I think is brilliant. Even though I know it did rip off some other song, I think it's a brilliant song. Another one I love is Lithium. That honestly might be my favorite song on the album. I think it's just a great lyrical telling of kind of bipolar, I'm so happy because today I found my friends, they're in my head. I'm so ugly, that's okay, because so are you. I think the lyric Light My Candle in a Daze because I found God is brilliant. On side 2, we have Drain You, I really enjoy. Lounge Act is pretty cool. And then probably Something in the Way is a very moving piece. I think Kurt Cobain wrote it when he was thrown out by his mother and he was living under a bridge. And it's just such a haunting piece. And I think other than Kurt Cobain, of course, you have Dave Grohl. I know, Riley, you're not the biggest fan of Dave Grohl, but I think he does a pretty good job with the drums on here. And you also have Chris Novoselic doing a pretty good job with the bass. I like it. I know you're not a big Nirvana fan, but I really enjoyed this album.
Oh, I think the album's fine. You said Dave Grohl was a great drummer, and as he would tell you,
I'm
not a great drummer. I'm not a great drummer. Like you hear those guys in like the R&B and jazz. I just copy what they do.
He did a good job on this, is what I'm saying.
No. I just copied it.
I really enjoy this record. I think there's a reason it's highly ranked. Maybe it's a bit overrated, but I always enjoy it. So
it is one of those records, undeniably, where it's as good as everybody says it is. I just don't like Dave Grohl, and Nirvana fans are fucking pretentious about it.
Well, no, I don't care. I mean, like I said, I'm not pretentious about anything.
No, you're not. That's why I'm saying I agree. I just hate the fans.
That's like Radiohead. I want to listen to their stuff so bad, but their fans on Rate Your Music piss me off so much I don't even want to touch the stuff. Serious, because I mean,
I know
that's me too. That's how I feel.
Neutral Milk Hotel.
Like I feel like I would love Radiohead stuff because I love that kind of stuff, but like I just like honestly like I love Creep so much and they're like, oh, it's the worst song ever. That's a fucking great song. Shut the fuck
Igor
up.
by Tyler the Creator.
I can't get past the cover art on that one. I feel
like A by Radiohead.
What's so funny?
No, just thinking of the cover of that Tyler the Creator.
It's hideous. What the fuck was he thinking? Like, put the one with the blonde wig. That's fine. Speaking of blonde, Frank Ocean's blonde like this, right, Jake?
Yes.
A by Radiohead.
Okay, Jake, your turn.
All right. So up next, so the next album on my list, this is one from a band where there were many different albums I was considering picking because they're one of my all-time favorite bands. It's Electric Light Orchestra, and the album that I chose was Out of the Blue. So again, picking one album from them was hard for me because I absolutely love this band. I think that Jeff Lynne is one of the most talented musicians, producers ever. I just think he's just incredible. I love the way that he uses the studio. And he's also just a great producer for many other artists as well. But for this album, this is probably my favorite double album from start to finish. Sometimes I struggle with double albums just because like there usually are some tracks on them that, I might not necessarily care for. So from start to finish, there usually are tracks I skip. I think of All Things Must Pass. I think there's some amazing highlights on there, but there's also tracks I'm not particularly that fond of. But this album, honestly, besides maybe one track, I think it's almost perfect from start to finish, in my opinion. I think it has a great variety of both up-tempo rockers and slower ballads. So I think it's a very fun listen. I think the production on this album is incredible from Jeff Lynne. I love the way that he blends the synthesizers and the keyboards with the guitars, and then the amazing string arrangements by Lewis Clark. Also want to shout out some of the other members of the band that played on this. Richard Tandy on keyboards, who recently passed, so rest in peace. Bev Bevan on drums. and Kelly Grocott on bass and backing vocals. And Kelly actually contributed a lot of backing vocals to ELO, and he even sings a bit of a lead on this album as well. But I think he really adds a lot to their sound as well. Something really crazy about this album, it's a double album, so obviously there's a lot of songs on it, but Jeff apparently wrote the entire album in 3.5 weeks after having a burst of creativity while he was in the Swiss Alps. So I think that that's really impressive that all these songs came to him in that short amount of time. In terms of some of my favorite songs on this record, I mean, I could list so many, but to list a few, Turn to Stone, the opener. This is, in my opinion, one of the greatest album openers ever. One of my favorite songs of all time. I absolutely love the production on it. I love the melody. Richard Tandy's keyboard playing on this is incredible as well. It's Over is a really moving ballad with some great orchestration. Sweet Talking Woman was a big single. That's also a really great track. Great strings on this as well. Night in the City, really cool track. Some cool sound effects on this. A really cool vibe. Starlight, very kind of soulful R&B influenced ballad. I really like this one a lot. I think it's one of my favorite ELO deep cuts. Sweet as the Night. This track has Kelly Grocott singing half part of a lead vocal on this, which for ELO, usually you'd think Jeff Lynne singing all the lead vocals. But on this track, Kelly Grocott sings several verses, and he does a really great job. I think he sounds great. And then, of course, to wrap it up, the Concerto for a Rainy Day on side 3, which is a combination of Standing in the Rain, which is a really cool instrumental, Big Wheels, which is a really heartbreaking ballad, Summer and Lightning, and then, of course, Mr. Blue Sky, which is ELO's most well-known song. So overall, I just think this is a great album start to finish. I think ELO is a really great band. And I just think that this is a great album. So if you're looking to get into ELO, if you want an album to check out, I would recommend this one. And also one of the other ones I'm going to mention in my honorable mentions. So that's my 6th album, ELO, Out of the Blue.
So I will admit that I think I kind of wrote them off a little bit earlier, that I said ELO was kind of derivative for me, but they've been growing a little bit on me after you recommended that Time album. So I definitely want to give this one a listen, going in with a fresher pair of ears. I think I maybe was a little unfair earlier, where I think I said they were like too derivative, and it sounded like just rehashing the Beatles over and over again. But they're growing on me. They're growing on me. So I definitely want to give it. I do love Mr. Blue Sky, though. I really do. But definitely want to give this a listen for sure.
Matt, I think you'll really like a lot of the tracks on this one. This is also one of my favorites. It didn't make my list or any of my honorable mentions, but like if you asked me about 4 years ago, I'd been like, "Oh, you gotta listen to Out of the Blue," because I think it's like one of the best produced albums and one of the best albums in terms of pure songwriting. Some brilliant chord changes by Jeff Lynne. He's kind of like Brian, where he did like pretty much all the work himself.
Or Prince.
Well, yeah. But it's incredible. It's a classic, and it's one of my favorite double albums of all time.
Real quick, I just wanted to mention, because so the one track that I'm still kind of struggling with on this album, and I wanted to ask Riley in particular this, because I know Riley's the most kind of like the prog fan of us. Yeah. What is your opinion, Riley, if you remember this song? What is your opinion on The Whale?
It's good. I like it. It's not like, I know people say that it's like one of his like best tracks. I disagree, but like it's good. It's this album for me. You kind of hit. I think you and I probably think the same of this album in terms of like what our favorite songs, like Turn to Stone, Stepping Out, Starlight is great. Mr. Blue Sky is, despite turning into one of the most overplayed songs, is as good as everybody says it is. I think there's one more on there for me that I really like that I'm blanking on. Hold on.
Jungle. Ooga, ooga.
That was not Sweet Talking Woman. That one's yeah. This, again, similar to the Strokes album, this is like all hooks, and it's
mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, go for it.
Ooh.
Oh, the Who Sell Out.
Hey, Jake.
The Who Sell Out.
Oh no, not the big beat.
Good choice, Riley.
Yeah, this is like, for the longest time, and this has a similar story to Beach Boys Today for me. It's like I kind of had to say that Who's Next was my favorite Who album, and I couldn't deny it. This is by far my favorite Who album. I had this on repeat my entire senior year of high school. Side 1 is one of my favorite album sides of all time. This is like one of the first like purposeful concept albums. No disrespect, it kicks Sgt. Pepper's ass. Like, people still call that like the greatest concept album of all time. No, it's not. It was like it was a half-baked concept. This is through and throughout. You have like radio jingles in between songs. So each song not only stands on its own, but it also has like short radio jingles in between each of them. And it's kind of said that it's meant to be like a pirate radio station in London in the 60s. But a lot of people call The Who like a very like hard rocking band. This is a very artsy album from them. And you can definitely see how Tommy came right after this in terms of production, but it's so well produced. It's like there's a great video by Joe Knows on YouTube, and maybe when this episode comes out, I can link it in the comments. But it's like a 51-minute deep dive into this album of just like how it's an art pop masterpiece, which is the best way I can describe it. Because before The Who did like hard rock, they were art students, and a lot of it was very artsy based. They were very like R&B based. It's a great psychedelic art pop album. I Could See for Miles is on here, but I wouldn't say that it's the best song on it. I would say Our Love Was is probably the best on here. Odorono is a really fun song about deodorant, but it has one of the best melodies and hooks in the entire Who's discography. The opening track, Armonia, City in the Sky, is incredible psychedelia. It's like Tomorrow Never Knows, but like by The Who. And it's absolutely incredible. Marianne and the Shaky Hand is a great song about getting a hand job. Tattoo is one of Pete's best guitar work in terms of not necessarily like shredding, but with like that little like jingle jangle style. Yeah, Our Love Was, I Could See for Miles, both great. Side 2, I Can't Reach You is another great one. Relax is a really cool song. Overall, every song on here is just like, it's a different version of The Who. Instead of going like boom with the guitar, it's great art pop. I think, Matt, you'd really like this one.
Oh yeah.
Jake can't get over the cover though, so I don't know.
I think it sounds really funny, honestly. It sounds like they show off their sense of humor. Like you're writing songs about deodorant and hand jobs. That's like funny.
It's kind of like Smiley Smile almost.
Well, I love Smiley Smile, so.
But like, even though there's some songs about that are like supposed to be ads or jingles, like Heinz Baked Beans, the song, which was actually written as like a real ad, I believe. I also know they wrote an ad for Coca-Cola, hence the name Who Sell Out. But Odorona, like, even though some of the songs are like jingles, they are still real songs with great melodies, great hooks. It's definitely worth a listen. I think you'd love this one, Matt.
I think so too. So Jake, you have an issue with this cover, like Riley has an issue with that. What's that one McCartney cover? You know what I'm talking about? That Riley can't get over.
No.
Which,
No.
One from the 90s.
No.
The one from the 90s with what on it.
No.
Oh, Off the Ground.
No.
That one. Okay. I couldn't remember. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say what body part it was, but the one that.
Please don't flash that on screen.
No, I'm not going to put it on the screen. Don't worry. I don't have it. So
Jake might.
I sent Jake something. I sent Jake something privately that I was like, I'm not going to put this in the group chat because Riley's going to punch me through the screen if I do. You remember?
When you were saying McCartney album covers, the first one I was thinking of was McCartney 2 with him making this stupid face, like, huh?
That's funny though. I like that one's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, I don't mind it either. That's what I first thought of.
Yeah. Oh no, go, because I want to say one last thing, but go ahead.
Say it.
Oh yeah, I was also gonna mention that Real, the last song on side 2, is what Pete Townsend calls one of his steps to Tommy, which is like a 2-part song. It's like a mini rock opera. He also had another mini rock opera called A Quick One While He's Away. Great album. Definitely needs a listen. Jake, it's gone. Don't worry.
It's gone, Jake. Don't worry. Okay, so this is the last of the ones I have on vinyl for the top 10. Then I'm gonna switch over to the CDs. This is, between this and Hunky Dory, my favorite Bowie album, David Bowie's Low. This for me is brilliant from start to finish. This was the start of Bowie's Berlin trilogy, so it was when he was recovering from his really terrible cocaine addiction. Around the time he made Station to Station, which he was under so much coke he didn't even know what was going on. And this for me is a great blend of art rock and the ambient influence of David Eno and Kraftwerk. And this album is very influential in the development of post-punk as well. We were talking about post-punk, primarily because Tony Visconti decided to run Dennis Davis, I believe was his name, his drums through something called the Eventide Harmonizer, which created this, like, I think he said it fucked with the fabric of time, and it created this very like gated drums that like boom, 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 and it's just brilliant. I mean, I don't think it's wrong for me to say that the drum sound on this album is more influential than certain artists' entire career. That's how influential the drum sound is on this. And what I love about this album is I think that this is a great album that shows off the medium of vinyl. Side one is primarily very fractured little ditties that Bowie wrote, like when he was kind of recovered from cocaine, Breaking Glass. I love that song. I mean, I think it's one of the most brilliant, like sub 2 minute songs I've ever heard in my life. She's such a wonderful person, but she got problems. One of the greatest lyrics ever written, in my opinion. What in the world? Has that awesome sound at the beginning. It almost sounds like Pac-Man, like the like it's 1977, and it sounds like you could have done it yesterday. Sound and Vision, one of Bowie's best songs. And what's crazy about it is that the lyrics don't come in until 3/5 of the song is over. And it's basically, I think, one of the best songs I've ever heard. One of the most upbeat songs I've ever heard about crippling depression in my life. Always crashing in the same car, I think, is a great metaphor for making the same mistake over and over and over again. And then Be My Wife is great too. And then you open and close with 2 instrumentals. Speed of Life, which is really cool because it fades in as you drop the needle. I think that's a really cool way to open it. And then A New Career in a New Town, which I believe he reused that for a song he had on Black Star. I don't remember which one because I don't really want to listen to Black Star because I know it's going to be really emotional, but I know he reused it. Side B for me, though, is when you really get the great ambient work of Brian Eno, the influence of Brian Eno coming in. Warsuzwa, or however you say that, is a really moving piece. Art Decade and Subterraneans are great too, but for me, Subterraneans is the highlight. I would say that song, I put that on and I feel like I'm walking in Berlin behind the Iron Curtain in the 70s, and I can feel all the despair and sorrow and everything. And the very cryptic lyrics at the end, Shareline, failing star, bribing me, Shirley. Who knows what he's saying, but it's just so moving to me. I think this is an absolutely brilliant piece of work. There's a reason it's one of Bowie's most influential records. There's a reason it's one of the most highly ranked records ever. And I highly recommend, if anybody has not ever listened to this, please give this a listen. It is a brilliant record. But I will say, I think it works better on vinyl than on streaming, just because you have the 2 distinct sides.
Yeah, if you first of all, I said this to you like a week ago. I think it's like his Love You.
Kind of, but I want you to explain
Yeah.
a little better for the viewers because I kind of got what you were saying, but I want to hear you kind of build on
I think it was more what I was trying to get across is like it's more in sentiment and as like a creative turn. It's like his Love You, where they're both getting into synth.
Mm-hmm.
They're both getting into weird material. Both at very difficult points of their life. It's like the same album or the same style of album on the other, like 2 sides of the same coin. Like this is like the dark,
Moody.
like moody Iron Curtain shit that you say, and then on the opposite side, I wanna pick you up.
Yeah, I also feel like this is the more highbrow version, and the other one's a little bit more lowbrow in parts.
Yeah, it's I feel like Love You is like more of a melodic side, and then this is more like an ambient side of
and lyrical too.
work.
Lyrical, it's much better.
Yeah,
for Jake, but it is.
Well, she's a roller skating child with the ribbon in her hair, and
I know you're not a huge fan of Low, right, Jake? You mainly just Sound and Vision.
Yeah, Sound and Vision, but again, I have to give it another listen. Again, I think it's something that's more up your alley, Matt, because you said it's more like ambient and stuff, and I'm more of a melody guy, which is why I probably vibe more with Love You. So, but I'll give it another time for sure.
I love You. I just think parts of it are very, very cringy. Like I don't know how you can defend Roller Skating Child. I mean, seriously, that
I can understand how you can defend Roller Skating Child. There's just some other ones I can't understand.
Well, no, I'm just saying because Roller Skating Child, like you play that to someone that like does not know anything about that album, they're gonna think you're like a pedophile almost. Like it's a disgusting song.
Round and around.
Butter on the butt.
Well, what's that one too? And then I know you're not a big fan of the Solar System one. I know, right?
I like it. Riley hates
Well,
it.
Riley doesn't like it because I could just see his face right now.
Listen, man, I tried and it never got
The
close. But
constellations.
that being said, I do think actually side 1 is fairly melodic. I think Jake would like side 1. I do not think he would like side 2.
Well, I think the problem with side 1, at least I think like Jake might struggle with it, is very fractured. The songwriting is very fragmented, and that's intentional. Because like you have songs that aren't even entire songs; they're like a verse and a bridge. Like
Sound and Vision.
Sound and Vision. But also the same thing with like Breaking Glass. It's literally just a verse and a bridge. There's no chorus.
Sound and Vision is like, that meme is like the dang, I put out this best song. Let's make it 1 minute and a half.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Breaking Glass. I would love Breaking Glass to be like. There's a live version he did that's like 3 minutes long, and I love it. But I don't know what it is about that song, but there's something so intoxicating about that song, and the way that the production kind of plays with the lyrics, like "Baby, I've been breaking glasses in your room again. Listen," and then it phases between the speakers, like boom, boom. Don't look at the carpet. I drew something awful on it. I mean, I don't know something about
that run of songs from that 3 run of the. I guess I don't. Yeah, sure. 3 song suite of Sound and Vision, Always Crashing the Same Car, and Be My Wife is absolutely like incredible late 70s pop. That you could, if you're not a huge fan of the other stuff, at the very least, those three songs are arguably the most complete songs on those albums. So
Yeah. Even Always Crashing in the Same Car, though, had a verse deleted because I think from what I
was like too depressing, right?
Well, what happened was that he sang it in an imitation of Bob Dylan, and he felt that it was like making fun of Bob Dylan's really bad car crash, so he told Visconti to take it out. Like he was afraid it would be too insensitive.
Great album, definitely worth the listen. Almost made my list. Not this one, but I would have definitely talked about it.
All right, Jake, your turn.
All right, so the sixth album on my list, this one's from 1977, Billy Joel, The Stranger. I absolutely love this album. I am a big Billy Joel fan, but I will say I do think this album is by far his best in terms of consistency, in terms of songwriting, and honestly, in terms of production. This album was produced by Phil Ramone, and I think he did a really great job. It sounds fantastic. And I just think Billy's at the top of his game in songwriting here. I think pretty much the entire album, I mean, you could say any of these tracks are highlights, but I mean, some of my favorites, Moving Out, the opener is a really great track. The Stranger, the title track, might be my favorite Billy Joel song. I love the very kind of like haunting vibe it has with that kind of like that piano intro, and then just a really rocking song. I love it a lot. Just the Way You Are and She's Always a Woman are beautiful ballads. Vienna is my favorite ballad on this album. I think it's just absolutely gorgeous, and I really love it. And then Get It Right the First Time is a great kind of hidden deep cut on here that I really like a lot as well. I think that song really rips. So overall, I think this is a really great album. I love it a lot. I just saw Billy Joel in concert this past week, and he played quite a few of the tracks from this album, as he usually does. I really enjoyed myself. I had a great time. So this is a great album. And if you are looking to get into Billy Joel, if you haven't taken a deep dive or maybe discredit some of his albums, I would say definitely give this one a listen in its entirety, because I think it's a really great album from start to finish.
And I just got that one on vinyl too from the flea markets, though.
Oh, nice. There you go. That was the first album I ever picked up, was The Stranger. So
on vinyl?
Yep.
Cool. Very cool. I think the first one I ever got on vinyl was Prince's Parade, I believe.
You guys want to see the first one I picked up on vinyl?
Sure.
Give me a second. Hold on. It's right here.
Oh, nice.
Graphic arts is my passion.
I mean, it's a shitty cover, but it's got some good tunes on it.
It does.
Yeah, it was the first one. That being said, The Stranger is it's great. I do think Billy kind of got a bit derivative of himself later on in his career.
Yeah.
And of like doing Piano Man Part 50. Like, oh, Anthony lives down the street. He went to pick up some ice cream. Like, it's just like that's his songwriting style, I find sometimes. But The Stranger is an absolutely incredible album, and that side one is fucking nuts. And then Scenes in an Italian Restaurant is arguably one of the best songs ever written, even though I'm kind of fucking tired of it. Brendan, you're going on stage. The Stranger has some great guitar work, the title track. And Vienna is, I think, one of the best songs ever written. So it's a great singer-songwriter album.
Yeah. I think Billy Joel, for a lot of people, maybe unfairly has a reputation of being more of a greatest hits artist. But I would say that from what you guys are saying, this one sounds like that kind of shuts a hole in that theory, I guess, so to speak. I know Billy Joel is one that's often cited. I see as like, oh, well, you're better off just listening to a hits compilation.
Well, I think if you're going to own two Billy Joel albums, it should be The Stranger and it should be a greatest hits compilation, in my opinion. I think that you pretty much get the best of everything with that. I do think he has some solid other albums as well. Like, I think Glass Houses is a very solid album. It's got a very kind of new wave feel. Some of the songs honestly sound like they're just like straight up Elvis Costello songs, but with Billy singing them. But they're good songs. I like them a lot. I
do love Slow Rock and Roll to Me. I think that's a great song. That's on there, I know.
Yeah. And there's also like Sleeping with the Television On is a really good deep cut on there. I don't want to be
Lena.
All for I'm doing it all for Lena. Yeah, it's a good song. 52nd Street's a pretty solid album too. That's got like Zanzibar and Stiletto. But overall, I mean, I think he's got a pretty solid catalog. I don't think all of his albums are flawless by any means, and there are some weaker ones for sure. But I think overall, I do think some people discredit him a little too much.
I will say this. I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of artists that you would be pleasantly surprised if you actually deep dove into some of their albums and you'd find some really cool stuff. I think some artists are... Huh?
I said Sitting with the Television On. It was that for me. And All for Lena. Yeah,
because I think that like a lot of people are very quick to sometimes say, okay, well, this artist is a greatest hits artist. And to some extent, I can see that if we're talking about like some of the early Motown stuff and some of that like 50, 60 stuff where like the albums were very like nobody really gave a shit about albums. It was more just like get the singles out. But a lot of stuff that like, I used to think, oh, this artist was just like, oh, they're just an albums artist or a singles artist. I listen to some of their deep cuts. I'm like, there's some pretty good stuff on here. So,
right.
like,
Riley, I wish you could have seen my face, man, when you said, now we're going to play Sleeping with the Television On. When I saw him last week, I was like,
did you get any recordings?
I did. I'll have to send you them later. But I was so excited. I literally was like the only person that like yelled out loud when he said Sleeping.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. And everyone in my section just dead silent.
McCartney, when I saw McCartney, he made a joke about like, we know which songs you all know because they're the ones we sing along to, but we're going to play the other ones anyway.
Yeah.
That was me when Mike and Bruce start with the boom, 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 forget you back. And I was like, yeah. And then everybody around me is like, what the fuck is this guy doing?
That was also like when I went to see Taylor Swift, and then I heard this guy scream because he wanted her to play that song because she has like the secret songs. That's like from her first one.
All right. We also went a whole episode without mentioning Taylor Swift.
I brought it in just because like we were talking about live shows.
Well, if we're going from the worst artists of all time to the best, I did not pick one.
But I'm talking about this one next, so don't talk too much.
All right, we'll talk about this one. That being said, I can't pick between them. I think I mentioned that during the Beatles thing, the episodes that we did. Just like these are the two albums that are so hard for me to put one over the other. I go back and forth between them. So I'll let Matt talk about this one. This is actually the American pressing. In many ways, I prefer it, but I don't really give a shit. They're both equally good for me in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's both really were the two like albums I could safely say were like my first favorites of all time. I mean, Rubber Soul is so acoustic and so folky, but also so cohesive that it had Brian Wilson write Pet Sounds. I don't want to go into too much detail because we've talked about the Beatles a shit ton. So I'm just gonna say favorite tracks: Norwegian Wood, You Won't See Me, I'm Looking Through You, pretty much the whole damn album. It's Rubber Soul and also Revolver, two of the most influential albums of all time. Hits the sweet spots between Beatlemania and what came after. So Beatles, Rubber Soul.
I'll go quick too, and then Jake, you could just share your thoughts about these because we talked a lot about this too. This for me is my favorite Beatles album. I think it really shows the diversity and all the sonic styles that they really like that they did, and I think it's a great showcase for that. Highlights for me: Eleanor Rigby, of course. I'm Only Sleeping. Here, There, and Everywhere is gorgeous. And Your Bird Can Sing, I think, is one of Lennon's best. I cannot believe he hated it. I think he's insane for thinking that. For No One is so heartbreaking. I Want to Tell You is probably my favorite Harrison on here. Gotta Get You in My Life's a great kind of funky song. And Tomorrow Never Knows is a great, very experimental track. Honestly, sounds like you could have made it yesterday, and it's from 1966, which is incredible. This, for me, is their best album. It will always be my favorite Beatles album. And I think I've noticed over time that this has started to kind of climb up the rankings, that a lot of critics now feel this is the best Beatles album. For a very long time, it was Sgt. Pepper. And I agree with those who feel that this is better than Pepper. For me, this is better than Pepper. And that's all I'm going to say because we've talked about the Beatles. So
I was just going to say, like, I feel like this is John's, like, leap in songwriting. And this is Paul's leap in songwriting. And I know I said this before, but I mean, they're like two sides of the same coin. They're like sister albums. You can't really have one without the other. And this especially was influential on Britpop. And so was this. This is like, but I had it the wrong way, I thought. This is like, you can hear the Verve come from this album. You can hear Oasis come from this album. And then with this one, you can also hear Oasis from this album. You can also hear Blur. And these are the albums that like defines generations, not just its time, but you could tell which 90s artists grew up listening to these albums.
Oh, for sure. And I agree with you too. I think Rubber Soul is number 3 for me, but I think they're both excellent albums. And I think that if those albums did not exist, I think popular music would look a hell of a lot different. I don't even know what the pop music landscape would look like without those two albums.
All right, so I will go. This is my 7th album on my list. And going from Billy Joel, who's an artist that I know some people kind of discredit as just a singles artist, we're going to go to another one of those artists that I think people sometimes kind of just discredit in that way. I'm going to go with ABBA, Voulez-Vous from 1979. So this is my personal favorite ABBA album. I think it's a great mix of Europop and disco. I think the production on this is really great. I think they did a really great job, Benny and Bjorn, with the production. I think the songs have a lot of energy, particularly the more upbeat tracks. The vocals from Agnieszka and Frida are amazing as always. I mean, they just sing the hell out of these songs. And I think that their vocals combined with Benny and Bjorn's songwriting really elevates the songs and makes it really what makes ABBA's songs so magical. In terms of the highlights on here, I can honestly list most of the tracks, but As Good as New, the opener, is a really great track, very kind of funky song, but I really like it a lot. It's got a great combo of kind of like some funky guitar playing with some great strings. Voulez-Vous, the title track, is a really great kind of disco sounding rocker with a really cool riff. I like it a lot. Angel Eyes is a really great kind of deep cut. It wasn't a single or anything, but it's a really great track. Does Your Mother Know has a really great lead vocal from Bjorn, which by this point, the guys weren't really singing a lot of lead vocals in ABBA. They did on some of the earlier albums, but by this point, they kind of realized that most people wanted to hear the girls, which rightly so. But I do think that Bjorn has a really great vocal on this song, and I think it really rips. I think it's got a great riff, and I like it a lot. If It Wasn't for the Nights, this is my vote for the most underrated song in the ABBA catalog. It wasn't a single. Apparently, it was supposed to be a single, but then they wrote Chiquitita, and they ended up releasing that instead. But this is just like disco pop at its finest. I think this is just an absolutely amazing song. I love the piano on it. Very kind of melancholic lyric. And I think, like you mentioned, Matt, it's one of those songs where it's a very happy and upbeat sound, but lyrically it's actually kind of a downer and it's very sad. So I really like the song a lot. Chiquitita, I think it's okay. Not my favorite, but I do like it. And then Kisses of Fire, the closer, is an absolutely ripping track. Another one of their most underrated songs. Definitely a deep cut, but it's a really great one. So I should also note that ABBA was also putting out several other amazing songs around this time that weren't even featured on this album. Gimme, Gimme, Gimme a Man After Midnight came out around this time as well, and that's one of their all-time best songs, in my opinion. And they also released a disco-sounding single, Summer Night City, which is maybe like the most disco-sounding song they ever put out. I think Benny and Bjorn weren't happy with that one. Like, I don't think they were thrilled with how it sounded. I actually really do like it, though. It's a very loud sounding song, Matt. It kind of has like a very almost like compressed sound, like it's very blaring. But I do think it's a really great track. So I enjoy it quite a bit. So if any of our listeners, want to dive a little more deeper into ABBA beyond just like a greatest hits compilation like ABBA Gold, I would recommend to start with Voulez-Vous. I think this is a really great album. And if you like a lot of disco music, like Bee Gees, Donna Summer, I think you'd really vibe with this album. I think it's great.
I'm just going to say something brief on ABBA. I do know the hits. I've never really deep dove into some of their albums, so I'll definitely give this one a listen. I really do appreciate Bjorn and Benny as songwriters. I think the Swedes have something with pop music songwriting down to a science. Them and Max Martin, I mean, the songs that have come out of that country are incredible. I mean, absolute hook masterpieces. So I definitely will give it a listen. I think I'm more of an ABBA guy than Riley is. I don't know what Riley feels about them, but that's okay, Jake. I have some fairly maligned artists that are be my honorable mentions too, so it's all good.
Waterloo's a good song.
That's a good song.
That's about it.
Yesterday I just saw ABBA tribute band, and they sounded really great, and they did quite a few of the songs from this album, so I was happy to hear those. They sounded really good.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad you had a good time. Another one I love, of course, iconic, is Dancing Queen.
Of course. That was the name of the band.
Real quick, what are your thoughts on Mamma Mia?
I like Mamma Mia. Okay, the song or the whole...
The movie.
Never seen the movies, don't need to see the movies.
Okay.
Thank you.
The song is great. I meant the movie, though, because I don't know if you had ever seen it, because I know some people really like it, some people don't.
Yeah, it's not my thing. Musicals aren't really my thing.
Well, also, it's a jukebox musical, which even if you ask big musical buffs, those are very polarizing to begin with, so...
And they re-recorded the songs, so I don't even think they're using the original ABBA versions. And I've heard the re-recordings, and I think they're inferior. So,
well, the other problem too is that they had like Pierce Brosnan sing, and the guy can't hold like 3 notes in tune. And you have like what are their names, Agnetha and the two groups,
Annie Frida, yeah.
And they're like they're amazing vocalists. So like trying to compare to them is you're gonna fall flat big time.
Right. Yep.
Waterloo's a good song. That's all I gotta say.
Okay, Riley, you're next.
London Calling. This is my 3rd favorite album, I believe. Yeah. How many do we have left that we're just gonna do? 3?
3 left.
Yeah, so London Calling is my 3rd favorite album of all time. It's for me what makes The Clash better than any other punk band is they are the only ones who truly tried to evolve the genre past I hate the UK.
Are you referring to the Sex Pistols?
Yeah, I love the Sex Pistols, and I was almost put one of their albums in the honorable mention. But And the only other one I could probably say is the Buzzcocks, simply for like what they kind of did a little bit past 79. Some of their longer songs, they're far more melodic. And the Buzzcocks were huge in influencing Britpop, and they were very hooky, so I'll give them their credit. But the Clash were the only bands that tried to move the new genre forward. They were one of the, I don't want to say they're one of the pioneers for post-punk, but honestly, they kind of are. Similar with Wire, where like maybe they sound more punk than post-punk, but regardless, um, this album is just incredible songwriting all over this place. There's not a single bad song on it. I think the least great song is Four Horsemen, but that's just more because it's basic punk than anything else they did. But there are so many different influences in the genres. You have a lot of surf influence on here, which is really cool. Brand New Cadillac is an incredible cover that blows the original out of the water. London Calling is obviously the title track. It's probably the most famous song from here, but I actually think it's one of the lower songs in the album. Jimmy Jazz is really cool. It's great guitar work by Mick Jones. Hateful is super poppy, super hooky. Rudy Can't Fail is where you get some of the reggae influence showing more past Police and Thieves from the debut. Spanish Bombs is one of the best chord progressions that they ever had. It's a straightforward, I guess it's more power poppy than punk, but again, it's them evolving the genre past, oh, I hate the UK. Lost in a Supermarket sounds like it could have come out today. That is kind of like the all I want to do from this album, where it's like if you told me that an indie band released it, I'd be like, yeah, great guitar work on that one. I really like the guitar tone on that one. Guns of Brixton is so fucking cool, one of the most badass bass lines ever made. Wrong on Boyo is cool. Death or Glory is incredible hooks. This whole album is fantastic, and the hidden track Train in Vain is one of the catchiest songs I've ever heard.
The one that I really like is The Right Profile. I love the lyrics on that song.
If you picked 3 random tracks and said they were your favorite, I would probably agree with you. It's that good of an album, and it's a double album.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things that came out from this year that the Clash did is also this EP. 4 great catchy songs that sound like they could have come from this. It's also worth a listen. Is this? You have Capital Radio. It has I Fought the Law, which is probably one of their also most famous songs. Gates of the West is incredible too, from this. But London Calling is one of those albums that has earned its classic status. It's as good as everybody says it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible songwriting from beginning of side 1 to the end of side 4 with the hidden track Train in Vain. The Card Sheet is also another incredible song, which sounds like it could have been by Billy Joel, but it's the Clash moving punk forward instead of just sticking in the same spot that it was for the past 2 years. So
yeah, I think that this is another record that is off-cited as like one of the all-time great doubles.
Yeah, when I get to my number 2 spot, I'll talk actually a bit more about London Calling and its place in double album history, which might spoil my next one, but
well, I know
you guys might have seen it coming anyways.
I know that a lot of people feel Sign of the Times is one of the last great doubles of the vinyl era because it came out in 87, right towards the end of when vinyl was dying. And then I feel like most people, I know like the first big rock double was what is that Zappa album called? The Mother's Invention one.
Mother's Invention, yeah.
What's it called? We're only in it for the
Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, Freak Out.
Thank you, Freak Out. No, I know it's Freak Out. I couldn't remember the name was. That was like probably the first big rock double, but the first big rock double that sold a lot, of course, was the White Album. And yeah, I would say pretty much Freak Out is probably like the first like rock double, and then you have like White Album and Houses of the Holy, and then Songs
Houses of the Holy is a single.
Oh, what's the one that's what's Physical
Graffiti?
Thank you. The one that's the Zeppelin one. London. What's the Stones one called? Exile on Main Street, and then you have like Songs in the Key of Life. That, and then like towards the end you have Sign of the Times. Is why they
Pink Floyd's The Wall too.
Oh, this one too. Layla.
Yeah.
That's a great double too. So it's like it's kind of cool. Like all these like cool double albums that came out, and of course Jake, the one you mentioned. I know it's not often included in the conversation, but I know you would probably argue it should be the ELO one.
Yeah, I think it's great, but
I would say even though there is another double album on my list and it ranks higher, I think this one, in terms of consistency and quality wise, in terms of just like having a set of songs, this is the best one.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they wrote in the span of 2 albums about 5 albums worth of material is fucking nuts. They had this album, which is a double album, then Sandinista, which is like this one, but on steroids in terms of doing different styles and different songs, which is 36 songs.
Mhm.
Sandinista is not like this one. It is very overbloated. That being said, it has some incredible songwriting and is also worth a listen. There's another album by The Clash that I will mention for the honorable mentions that I think is actually nearly equally good as this one and that never gets enough love, but
Cut the crap.
you gotta cut the craps, not cut
By the time, I would say, Riley, that was actually originally supposed to be a triple called Crystal Ball, but Warner Brothers balked at as they forced Prince to cut it down. And ironically, I think they actually made a better album by forcing him to cut it down. I think as a triple would have been too
You
bloated.
can't say the same about Sandinista because the record company's like, please don't make this a triple album. Let's cut this down a bit. And they're like, no, we're gonna make it a triple album and we're gonna sell it for the price of one album because we're cool.
They probably lost a shit ton of money on that. I can only
Oh,
imagine.
I think if I remember correctly, they did. And that's why when they got to Combat Rock, they're like, let's not make this a double album. Let's just make it. And then you know what happened? They broke through in the US with Rock the Casbah and Should I Stay or Should I Go?
That's
And then they were on Stranger Things and they became the band that was known as the Should I Stay or Should I Go band.
Well, that's like Kate Bush became the running up
That hill girl.
lady, and like people.
You with God.
I love that song, but my sister doesn't like that version.
Kate Bush has so many better songs, but
Oh yeah, no, I know she's a great like art poppy person. Okay, my turn. Now this is one that I was going to talk about Tapestry, but since Jake talked about it, I'll pull something else. This is a band that seems to be somewhat maligned nowadays, but I think this is another album that it deserves its classic status for the reason. The Doors debut. Riley doesn't like the Doors. That's fine. I do. I don't know what you would describe this as. Could this be described as like proto prog in a way? What would you describe this as?
I would say similarly, I would say it's like post psychedelia.
Okay, post psychedelic. Yeah. Well, I really like it. I think that I really like Jim Morrison's voice. Some people don't. Do I think that yes, a lot of people like him because he's hot? Sure. But I enjoy what he had to say. I quite like his lyrics. Yeah, they're maybe a bit pretentious. I don't really care. But I think Ray Manzarek, that's where this really shines. His organ work is incredible. So let's hear Break On Through the Other Side. That's a great start off the record. You know, it's just got that like nice side of do 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 with the organ and everything. Soul Kitchen, I think, is a great tune. 20th Century Fox is great. Of course, Light My Fire is iconic. I really enjoy the cover of Alabama Song. Backdoor Man is a great cover too. And then I really love some of the organ work on like I Looked at You and End of the Night. There's a haunting vibe to End of the Night that I really enjoy. And then The End, I think, is a great song too. I really enjoy this record. I think it has, like you said, post psychedelic. I think I can almost a little bit ambient parts too, I would say, with maybe like Manzarek's organ work. I really enjoy it. I know a lot of people on the Beach Boys sub like, I hate the Doors. I think they're fucking awful. I like the record. I don't care. Too bad.
Listen, I hate Jim Mor. No, I don't even hate Jim Morrison. I just hate the Doors fans. And I think Jim Morrison's very much overrated in terms of some of his lyrics. I am the Lizard King, like cool.
What song? Yeah,
that's not care.
That's not on.
But that being said, Robbie Krieger and Ray Manzarek absolutely blow this shit out of the water. And I think it's what is it? John Desmore is the
I believe
drummer.
so. Let me pull up.
But I think everything backing track wise and rhythm section, like they don't have a bass player, they just have Ray Manzarek taking over as on keys. In many ways, I guess it's almost proto new wave, where it's like we were in terms of like what they're using to make their sound. The instrumentalists, they're incredible, and then I just don't care for Jim Morrison.
I mean, that's fair, but I will say this: I can stomach his voice more than I can Bob Dylan's. I'll say that.
Oh yeah, but
Bob
that's like
is like nails on a chalkboard, and Neil Young too. I'm sorry. I tried listening to some of his stuff, and I was like, I couldn't stand his voice.
Do I think this is the best album of 1967? I don't think it's even like top 5. Might get my teeth kicked in, but whatever.
Well, that was a good.
It does deserve its classic status, if only for the instrumentals and the backing tracks alone.
Oh no, the backing tracks are great, and I like I said, I like some of Morrison's lyrics. Yeah, he could be a bit pretentious, but this one was before I think he got too bad because this is.
Oh well, yeah, it's the debut. It's the debut. In the End is also an incredible song. Or The End is
that's like an epic. That's like an epic song.
Yeah, it was used in Apocalypse Now, and I think it was absolutely beautiful. It's not on this album, but I also really love Light My Fire. Like that's one of the greatest.
This is on the album.
It is. Okay, well, shows you how much I know about the Doors discography. But
Jake, do you have any thoughts on the Doors?
Yeah, I wouldn't say like I'm into any of their albums as a whole, but I do like quite a few songs. I like some of their deeper cuts too. There's stuff from like Roadhouse Blues, that album. There's some songs I really like on there. I like Blue Sunday a lot. I think it's a really pretty song. People Are Strange, that album has some really great songs. I think the title track, My Eyes Have Seen You, is a really cool track. I actually have to re-listen to the debut because it's been a long time since I've heard it. So I'm definitely going to give it another listen after this.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy it. Like I said, I get the criticism of the Doors, and I wouldn't say they're like my all-time favorite band. But as you can see, my taste is all over the shop. So I don't personally put anything above anything else. I like all kinds of stuff. So this is just another thing that I really like. So I just wanted to bring it up. And I do have another one from 67 in my honorable mentions. We'll get to that when we get there. And I have another one from 67 coming up next, actually. So there was a lot of good stuff that year. Back to you, Jake. Your turn.
All right, so the eighth album I want to talk about is by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and it's Damn the Torpedoes from 1979. So this is one of my favorite Tom Petty albums. There's another one that's kind of neck and neck with it, but I'm going to mention it when I get to my honorable mentions. But I think this is a really great album. It's just great rock and roll from start to finish. It's got that classic jangly guitar sound that Tom Petty was known for. And it's just a very like Heartland rock sounding album. I think it's really great. Some of my favorite tracks on here, I love Refugee, which was a single. I think it was top 20. Really great track. Here Comes My Girl is one of my favorite Tom Petty songs. Really great track. It's got like kind of a spoken word verse, and then it goes into this really pretty chorus. Really, I've always loved that song. Even The Losers is a great album cut. Century City, Don't Do Me Like That was a single that I really like a lot. And then it closes with Louisiana Rain, which is a very pretty kind of mid-tempo track. So I think this is a really great album. I think Tom Petty is one of those artists that a lot of people really like, but maybe don't know too much beyond like the radio hits. And I think if you're looking to get into some more deeper stuff from him, I would check out this album. I think it's a great place to start.
That's me, because I do like some of the radio hits, but I'll definitely take a listen to this. Like I love Free Fallin'. Love that song.
Yeah, that's from the other album I'm going to mention later. So,
okay.
If you're listening to this on CD, we're giving room.
I love that. I love that.
I love Tom Petty. I haven't listened to him in a couple of years, but Don't Do Me Like That is my favorite Tom Petty song, and it comes from this album. Refugee is great. This is probably the album you should listen to if you want to get into that more, I guess, guitar-based stuff compared to like his regular singer-songwriter stuff.
Yep.
He's a very underrated guitarist. He is another guitarist influenced by Roger McGuinn. His Rickenbacker is so fucking cool.
Well, and also if we're talking about guitar, also shout out to Mike Campbell. He plays really great guitar on all of Tom's records. So
yeah, Tom Petty, someone who I feel like he doesn't get his flowers enough. He's kind of just lumped in as like a singles artist of the '80s, and it's really unfair.
That, or he's known as Lucky on King of the Hill, because he did play Lucky on King of the Hill.
All right. It's a Pink Floyd one. You guys want to guess it?
Animals. The Wall.
Yeah. This one, oh shit, you can barely see it. First of all, here is one of my first CDs that I ever stole from my parents. I still have it. I wrote my name over my dad's. I feel like maybe it's not my favorite Pink Floyd album right now, but like 2 or 3 years ago, I was making my own triple album cut of The Wall, and in like when you're staying up until 4 a.m. editing songs so you can have a 2.5 hour version of it, you kind of got to admit it's your favorite album of all time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't actually until very recently where that changed. But I was still up at 3 a.m. making my own triple album cut of The Wall, so I kind of have to give it its flowers. It's like I can't not put it as high as I can. It's the album that I think in 2021 I listened to like 529 times. I'd have to find it. I know this album note for note, word for word. It's if you put it on, I can sing along with the entire thing. I have like 5 copies of it. Hold on. This is my listening copy. This was one that I found at Savers for $3. I still have my CD. I think I had another copy at one point, but I sold it so I can actually like. Yeah, I was almost the person who's like, hey, look how many copies of The Wall I have.
Better that than like freaking the Tortured Poets department or something.
But yeah, anyways, as for the actual album, I think it is the greatest rock opera of all time. It covers so many things. Long story short, it's like World War II kind of sucked. It ruined this kid's life because his dad died. Which could also be the summary for the final cut. but which if I ever get around to do a Pink Floyd video on my own channel, I will go into why I love the final cut, which is kind of like other songs that weren't used for the wall. But anyways, it's again another album that deserves the praise it gets. It's the songwriting is incredible from Roger Waters. Say what you will about him as a person, he's definitely a very questionable guy in some aspects, in terms of like political views. But songwriting is incredible. As usual, you have great lyrics from him. David Gilmour is killing it on guitar. The way that a lot of the songs flow into the others, I'm sure Nate would bring up that Bruce Johnston was on the show Must Go On. As one of the first linking facts, I'm like, oh, cool, the Beach Boys.
Isn't Tony Tennille on it too?
Who? Tony Tennille is on it. She's also on backing vocals. And I guess there's that one part of it where people say that it gets a little slow for them on disc 2. I don't care. I think that each side is very strong in some aspects. Side 3 is probably my top 3 favorite sides of music of all time. Up next to Beach Boys Today is side B. Because the run of songs from Hey You, then you have Is There Anybody Out There, Nobody Home, Vera, Bring the Boys Back Home, and Comfortably Numb is incredible stretch of songs. Very deep album, very depressing album. Kind of gets shit on. It's pretty easy to shit on this one in Pink Floyd's fan base now because people don't like Roger, but okay. It's kind of like Pet Sounds where like some people are like, oh, I like it, but I like these ones better. So I guess that's fair, but you got to give this one credit. It's probably the greatest rock opera ever written. If not, maybe a little overbloated, but
so would you say it's like this and Tommy are like the 2 best rock operas out there?
I would say this. I love Tommy, but this is like miles above Tommy.
Well, I wasn't trying to make it like a competition. I'm saying, but like those because when I think rock opera, those are the first 2 that come to mind for me. I can't really.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, there's like 5 different ways to listen to this album. You have the album itself, you have the movie, and then you have the live version. Which I'm not gonna lie, if the live version was physically released, it might just take this version's place because it's absolutely fucking nuts. There's like an 8-minute version of Run Like Hell, which is one of the greatest things I've ever listened to. It's probably my favorite live track from any band. Run Like Hell, by the way, easy highlight for me. It's kind of like disco meets U2.
Oh, wow. That sounds really interesting.
So I think you would really... Have you listened to this Run Like Hell?
I may have listened to it. Honestly, I haven't listened to too much Floyd, but
I'll send you the live version because I think you should experience that one before you listen to the studio version. Because Roger has a special intro he did for the live version in 1980, and it's fucking incredible. There's a lot of context that you need to know for side 3 and 4. I don't want to get into it right now.
Well, I can Google it. It's fine. But I want to say this. I think listening to this and listening to everybody talk about everybody they want, there's a lot of stuff I really want to listen to now because there's a lot of I think you guys have really cool taste, and I think there's a lot of stuff that we may not like everything that we recommend to each other, but I think that we can at least find some common ground on some stuff, even if we don't like
Yeah.
I will say this to defend my ass. I gotta cover my ass here. Side 4. Just look it up. Look it up. Because Roger has gotten a lot of backlash in recent years for what he did on side 4 of The Wall, in terms of like some of the political stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, the main character of the rock opera, Pink, goes into this like hallucinogenic, trippy state because he's drugged out, and he starts pretending like neo-Nazi shit. But I promise.
Oh, but
yeah,
it's like a character. It's not really.
It was a character, and it was actually meant to portray why loneliness can destroy somebody. And like, I know it sounds super pretentious. I sound like a Radiohead fan.
No, I mean, like, it's like the way I look is like you're creating a character. You're not necessarily condoning that. It's like, have you ever heard Running Gun Blues on Man Who Sold the World by David Bowie?
Yeah.
That song is like about like this like Vietnam War veteran that says like the gooks and like all this horrible racist shit.
Right.
But it's not Bowie being racist. It's Bowie portraying like how like PTSD like messes up with your mind. Like I just see like you're creating a character. It's not necessarily you're condoning the action. So I don't really.
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
being ridiculous.
Especially Roger. His dad died in World War II. And it was basically him saying like loneliness has destroyed the main character Pink, and he starts doing drugs, and it's how it messed him up, and it's also it's like a double meaning. Like loneliness fucked him up, and World War II was fucking shit. But you need the context because he says some fucked up shit.
I mean, like I said, I just see it as like he's playing a character, like David
Right.
Bowie on Running Gun Blues. Like I didn't listen to that song and think, oh my God, David Bowie's a big racist. I just saw it as like he's portraying a Vietnam War veteran that's like fucked up from like his
Yeah, and
who has these crazy thoughts.
that's why I think actually watching the movie gives a lot of context behind the actual album and also the live show too, where they have some like actors doing some stuff. I just
Well,
talked about the ball for a while, but that being said, it's my number two. I can't deny how much I loved it. It's one of those albums that kind of got me through a hard time too. So it's like
happened to me too. And that's
very
all.
relatable album, especially when you listen to Nobody Home. Incredible songwriting on that one. I think Jake knows that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
All right.
one last thing I just want to say about this is that I think the problem is that people take things too literally nowadays. Like I think
Yeah.
that we've lost the concept of nuance and all that. So people like take something as like, oh my God, it must mean this. And the other thing too, and I have to mention this, and it'll be brief, the obligatory what's his name? Nostalgia critic. Don't know what he was trying
Oh
to do.
fuck. No,
To
no,
be
don't even
fair,
talk about it. Don't give him the time of day.
everybody hated it. It sucks. So we're just warning everybody, don't even look it up. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah,
I mean, I never cared for him anyway, but
there are some valid criticisms for this album in terms of it being like an hour and 29 minutes. But that being said, it's certainly an experience. I think people need to listen to it at least once.
mhm.
Um, I honestly don't think there's many bad songs on here. In fact, I would say at worst it's a little slow, but every piece is necessary to listen to it. Um, if you do want to cherry pick songs, Comfortably Numb is the obvious one. Run Like Hell is my personal favorite. Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 is, truth be told, as good as it is. It's
Wasn't that
just
like a
a bit
number one hit?
overplayed. Although it's you definitely need to listen to Happiest Days of Our Lives right before it for it to get the full experience. Young Lust is fucking insane. I love it. One of My Turns is kind of like a two-part song in the sense that like the first minute and a half is slow, and the last minute and a half is like absolutely like cocaine rush. Great album. Listen to it.
Okay. Moving on from the wall. Now I know I said I was gonna do something for 67 first, but I realized that I got into this album first. So Layla and Other Sorted Love Songs by Derek and the Dominoes. Now, Derek and the Dominoes, in case anybody doesn't know who they were, it was a group that was started by mainly it was Eric Clapton and Bobby Whitlock. Um, after what was that band he had before? Not Cream, the other one.
Blind Faith.
Blind Faith, thank you. We also have Jim Gordon, who's problematic, but a great drummer. We have Carl Radle on bass and percussion, and then Dwayne Allman shows up from the Allman Brothers band to shows up a couple tracks in, and really, I would say there are so many great songs on this album, but the highlight for me is probably the battling guitars between Eric Clapton and Dwayne Allman, and then also Bobby Whitlock's backing vocals.
Yes.
I would say that's really the highlight for me. So you open with I Looked Away. That's a gorgeous track. And also, too, I got to say, too, this was inspired by Clapton's lust for Patty Boyd, who was married to George Harrison at the time. So basically, it was like a big love triangle that inspired this whole album. You open with I Looked Away. That's a gorgeous track. Bell Bottom Blues, one of the best songs that Eric Clapton ever wrote. Gorgeous track. Then you got Keep On Growing, which is a great like kind of like rocker with like the with the guitar riff. And then Dwayne Allman comes in with Nobody Knows When You're Down and Out, which has some really cool riffs on it. I Am Yours, I think was based off of like that's another really moving track that's by Eric Clapton. That one I believe was actually based off of like some old like Indian poet thing. Key to the Highway is a great 9-minute jam. In fact, actually, a fun fact: the reason why it opens with a fade in is because Sam the Sham. Do you know Sam the Sham, Jake?
Heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, so he was actually in the studio next door performing Key to the Highway, and they started jamming. They said, "Run to the tape player and hit tape," and that's why it opens with that fade in. Tell the Truth is great. Why Does Love Have to Be So Sad? I just love the guitar work on this album. I just think like the guitar, there's almost the passion in the guitar. You can just feel like it's like the guitar is like crying and screaming out in pain. And then of course, the highlight for most people is Layla, epic song. You got the two different parts. You got the screaming guitars that, he got me down on my knees, Layla. And then you have like the coda that was Jim Gordon. I think he stole it from his girlfriend, but he wrote that. And then another song that I really love, and this is mainly Bobby Whitlock that hasn't been talked about. I don't feel it's talking about Thorn Tree in the Garden. I think it's just an absolute stunning way to end the album.
Yes.
I love Thorn Tree in the Garden. Love, love, love this. I love this whole album from start to finish. I think Clapton sucks as a person, but this really shows his talent. And I really think, though, that it's really, like I said, the brilliance in this album for me, other than the lyrics and like the whole backstory with Patty Boyd and everything, is just, like I said, it's the dueling guitars between Clapton and Allman, and then Whitlock's backing vocals, I think really just makes the whole album sing. So, Riley, do you want to add anything to Layla?
Yes, this was gonna be on my list too. Um, this is one of the albums I learned guitar to, so it also holds a very special place in my heart. I remember it's very early on in my guitar, I guess, career. Um, and I was nowhere near ready for this material,
Hmm.
but I forced myself to learn about half the songs on here,
Hmm.
and it very much still resonates in my guitar playing today. So I want to shout that out too. Bell Bottom Blues is one of my favorite songs of all time.
Absolutely.
Um, Layla too, but I'll be honest, over the years, as I've grown a little bit more tired of Layla, I've grown to love Bell Bottom Blues a bit more.
Yeah, that one and then the
Um,
I've grown really fond of other than Bell Bottom Blues is Tell the Truth, I would say, and then Thorn Tree. Thorn Tree is one that's really grown on me a lot over the years.
I Looked Away, another incredible track. I think this is this incredible songwriting from Clapton, and I think Whitlock helped him out on a bunch of
Whitlock helped
songs.
a lot. Yeah, Whitlock helped a lot. And then also I Am Yours, I mentioned. That
Yep.
one was taken mainly, that's a great song too. That was taken from like an old like Indian poem or something. That was
This one just it hits the spot because not only does it have great guitar work, but the songwriting is also incredible.
there's the
Tell the
cover.
Truth is great. Why Does Love Got to Be So Sad is one of the most ferocious guitar songs I've ever heard.
Hmm.
It's just Clapton going all out. I think this many people say this is like the last great guitar album from Clapton. So
Hmm.
I disagree, but I can see why, because it's very much the last like fury guitar work from Clapton where he's just going like all hard rock, I guess, even though it's not really hard. I think it's also just a very influential album. It kind of showed what was going to happen for like soft rock in the 70s.
Yeah, especially on songs like I would say I Am Yours and like Thorn Tree. You could definitely hear some of the influence on the soft
Yeah.
rock, some of the softer.
The I might get crucified for this. I think Little Wing is better on this than by Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I think Hendrix gave a much better vocal, but in terms of like backing track, it
And the
blows it out
passion.
of the water. Even though the guitar work might be better by Hendrix, I feel like this is more how the song should sound.
I think
Um,
also too, maybe it's just me, but I feel like this album just is sonically is lust because he was so lusting after Patty Boyd, and it shows
yeah,
guitar work and in the vocals. There's just so much passion there.
it's
Incredible.
and Clapton has become a shitty person.
Hmm.
Uh, I feel like though this is still at the point of his life where he is a very broken person.
Hmm.
And I feel like this is like way before he kind of went down a fucking shithole and like became an ass about certain topics. But I feel like at this point in his life, he was still just he's very young and he was very broken. I don't know if you know his backstory. I read his autobiography. Um, he's-
I know about the son that died. I don't know about anything else.
right. Well, that's again, I feel like he didn't become like an extremely shitty person until I would say a bit later on in his life. But that
Well,
being said, although never mind.
rants in the 70s is the one thing that people point to.
But at this point in his life, 69, 70,
Yeah.
heroin addict, came from a broken household, grew up with his grandmother. Um, a lot of shit happened, and you can hear it in all the songwriting on this one. So
Also, too, this was fun. The fun fact this was recorded in Miami, so that's really cool. And I think actually it kind of gives it its distinct sound because I believe that the humidity kind of mucked up with the tapes, and that's why it's not a brilliantly recorded record. On the same side, though, I think that actually helps it because I think it kind of adds to the ambience of the record. Tom Dowd was the executive producer too, so that definitely helps too. And yeah, I one of my all-time faves. And I'll be honest, I bought this alongside. I tell this story all the time. I bought this on CD. This is the Japanese DSD CD. I bought it alongside Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On." As I'm like, I hear these two are the greatest. The Hoffenforms, High Heaven. I came back to this way more than that one.
yeah. What was I gonna say? I feel like also I know that this kind of hurt Clapton to make because he didn't want to be he never really wanted to be like super duper famous. He
Hmm.
kind of wanted to be like a little bit more like lower profile. That's why he left the Yardbirds after For Your Love. And that's also why he wasn't super happy in Cream. And then so he made this one and with the under the name Derek and the Dominoes. And then when it didn't really sell too well, like they had like a hit with Layla, but when it didn't sell well,
In the
it
UK, even
actually crushed him. Which is also why after this you have like a 5 year gap of music because he was just kind of like touring and then quit and fell off the face for a while.
and then of course they tried to do a follow up because they toured this. They tried to do a follow up, but that fell apart too. They never
Right.
recorded a second album. But I will say this, that it is now rightly regarded as one of the greatest albums of all time. Kreisgau right off the bat gave an A+, which is very rare for him. He also gave an A+ to London Calling too.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, he loved this album, and I'm actually kind of surprised he loved it so much because he's not usually big on like really long riffs and really long songs, but he loved it, absolutely adored it, and I
Great songwriting.
it has amazing songwriting, absolutely one of my favorites, and thank you for letting me have a chance to talk about it. I appreciate that, but that's why I brought you into, because I know you're really passionate about it as well. Any thoughts?
Yeah, this was literally the soundtrack to my senior year of high school. I'm not gonna lie. I remember playing it in the winter. And then I didn't stop playing it until I graduated, and I also learned guitar with it too. This is the album that got me good at guitar.
Yeah, and I could definitely hear. I mean, I don't play guitar myself, but I could definitely see if you are like forcing yourself to listen to this on repeat, especially with how intense and how complex the guitar work is. I could see how it could make you a better guitarist.
It made me a better guitarist, not just in terms of like my soloing. Like Layla was one of the first like solos I ever learned. I didn't learn the slide guitar part, but like I learned a lot of the riffs from this, and then also with like some of the slower stuff, I looked away. I also learned like selective picking with this one. I learned finger style with a lot of the stuff. Absolutely, if this album didn't exist, I probably wouldn't be the guitarist I am.
Duane Allman did a lot of the slide work on this, right? That was mostly Duane Allman.
Yeah,
because I know that he comes in. You can tell when he comes in because the first he's not there, and then all of a sudden he comes in, and that's when.
He wasn't an official member of the group, but I know Clapton wanted him to be.
Yeah, because he was still with the Allman Brothers Band, and he died not too long after he got in.
Right, that's also what crushed him too, was when he died.
Yeah, because he was. I mean, Duane Allman was one of the all-time great guitarists, but he died so tragically young. It's like what could have been, you know.
Yeah. All right, Jake.
You've
been waiting patiently for the past half hour.
No, we talked a lot about this, so your turn.
And the wall.
All right, so we'll move on. Since we were talking about the Clapton Patty Boyd love triangle, let's talk about a George Harrison album. So the George Harrison album I want to talk about, I know I mentioned All Things Must Pass earlier. I do think that, a lot critically, I'm not going to argue that that's not his best album. I would agree with that. I do think that it's super strong. But for my personal favorite George Harrison album, I'm actually going to go with his self-titled album from 1979. This is one of my favorite solo Beatles albums, honestly. I just love the chill and laid back vibe of it. And it's just a really happy sounding album. So it always puts me in a good mood when I listen to it. George was in a very happy place in his life at the time. He was with Olivia. They just gotten married, and he had just become a father as well. So really happy time for him. And you can really hear that in the music. This album, I really love the production on it. It was produced by George and Russ Titleman. And it kind of has that classic kind of late 70s soft rock sound. But yet it's still really interesting with the instrumentation and stuff, where it does really stand out from a lot of the other albums from that time. Some of the highlights on here, the opener, Love Comes to Everyone, is one of my all-time favorite songs, like ever, by anybody. I just think it's such a happy and uplifting song. I love the production on it. I love the lyrics. I love Eric Clapton's guitar work at the beginning, and I also love Steve Winwood's synthesizer solo halfway through. This is just a really uplifting song, one of my favorite George songs. Not Guilty is a really cool track, kind of has a very like haunting vibe to it. I know he originally wrote that while he was still with the Beatles. I believe it was like a White Album outtake. But it's a really cool track. I really like the production on this album version. Blow Away was a single from this album, another really uplifting and happy song. I really love this one a lot. Dark Sweet Lady, very pretty acoustic ballad, I believe, for Olivia. Your Love Is Forever, another really moving ballad. Soft Touch, another moving ballad. And then this album closes with If You Believe, which is another very uplifting and moving song that sounds very kind of like ELO like. You can definitely tell that like Jeff Lynne was influenced by a lot of this stuff. So this is just a really great album, start to finish. I would definitely agree that All Things Must Pass does have higher highs for sure, because I mean the highs on there are just absolutely incredible. And I'll talk a little bit more about that once we get to the honorable mentions. But this is just a really happy and uplifting album, and it's one that I come back to a lot. So that's my 9th album, George Harrison, self-titled.
It's one that's growing. I mean, I'm relatively new to it. I listened to a lot of George's stuff, but I didn't really stick with many of the later period albums minus Cloud 9. Just because I kind of heard that it's like mostly derivative and just kind of like it's George songwriting. But I've seen in recent years this one get a bit more praise. So
Harrison in general in more recent years has gotten a bit more praise, especially as a lot of younger people have taken over for critics, because a lot of like older critics did not like him at all. I mean, we know Kreisgau wrote some scathing things about him, but I've noticed that a lot of the younger generation seems to be like George Harrison is almost their favorite Beatle. And I think like as they have kind of come into the fray and started, kind of writing more stuff, his later stuff has gotten more praise. Because I know that a lot of the old critics worshipped, as I said it before, they worshipped the Lennon altar. So for them, George Harrison was only good for 2 songs on an album.
I mean, George was my favorite Beatle for a while. It wasn't really until recent years where I kind of circled back to John. John was my first favorite. Then it was George for like 10 years, and then kind of went back to John. But still, like George is incredible songwriter, often understated in his songwriting, and even more so his guitar playing. Great guitarist. He's more like a Johnny Marr, where I guess he's on like on a technical scale, like incredible, not like Jimmy Page playing like 50,000 notes a second. It's
Or like Eric
he's more feel. He's like Gilmore with, and it was also understated with his guitar playing is he learned a completely new style about halfway through his career. Started off as like a regular guitar lead guitarist, and then he learned slide guitar in like '69. So
yeah, I will say with George, even though I know you guys know like I love Paul, but I will say I feel like I emotionally connect with George's songs the most, like on like an emotional level. Whereas like Paul's, I really vibe with them. I think they're a lot of fun, a lot of his songs. And he does have some really beautiful ballads from his solo career that I really do connect with emotionally as well. But I just feel like George's music is like, it just comes across as very spiritual. And obviously like on All Things Must Pass, and living in the material world and stuff like that. I think that was his intention, was for it to come off as spiritual because he was a very spiritual person. But I've just always really connected with his songs on that level. And I think that's why like he's become, one of my favorite Beatles. So.
I feel like George also was very cerebral, and I feel like George actually walked the walk. Like Lennon, by comparison, like kind of talked about all this spiritual stuff, but I think a lot of his actions kind of betrayed his words. Like that's a common criticism. Like Imagine No Possessions. Then they have like a huge apartment full of shit. Whereas like George Harrison, I could really believe like he was someone that really didn't need a whole lot of material stuff.
If you believe.
There's a whole documentary called Living in the Material World about George Harrison, I think was directed by Martin Scorsese. So like, I really feel like that's why I think a lot of people connect with George, because he was very cerebral and spiritual, and he actually walked the walk.
Yeah. And I don't want to act like George was a perfect person either, because he wasn't. And obviously, like, I know he committed some like infidelity and stuff like that when he was with Patty and stuff. But like, I think like by this point in his life, he was really in a happy place, like with Olivia and then having Donnie and all that. And I just think that like, like by the end of his life and in the last 2 decades of his life, I really think like he was in a really great like state of mind. Just comes off as just a really good person, if a little cranky at times. He does always kind of have that side, but
he was cranky, but it was kind of funny. But no, I mean, again, I'm not trying to say none of the Beatles were saints, and nobody's a saint. But I do think that all of them had made attempts in their lives to be better people than they had been in the past. Even Lennon was doing that, before he
for
was.
Sure. Absolutely.
And but no, one of my favorite George cranky quotes was when he said the best thing about the Spice Girls is you can watch them on TV and cut off the sound.
They're all very funny, and George has was
very
I guess
dry.
more than John had a dry sense of humor.
Yes, he did.
He helped fund Monty Python, so
yes, and I love Monty Python, so thank you, George.
I do too. Life of Brian is way better than Holy Grail. Not gonna lie.
I haven't watched Life of Brian, but I do love Holy Grail. Holy Grail is hysterical.
Always look on the bright.
The part that always makes me die laughing in Holy Grail is like, we're Knights of the Round Table. I lose every time I watch the Camelot thing. Oh my god!
I love the I'm not the Messiah. He's the Messiah. I could very much see why George. He's one of the first indie filmmaker producers, right?
I believe so. I mean, he also helped introduce a lot of Indian music to the West, of course, and with Ravi
He
Shankar.
gave Ricky Fattar a job as a Ruddle.
Yes. I mean, George was a pretty very interesting guy, and like I said, I really respect that he was someone that I really feel like didn't need all those material things and was found pleasure in the small things in life. Yeah,
because even with his giant ass house at Friar Park, it wasn't even much like indulgent. He liked it for the land, not for the house. Like,
yeah, he was into gardening and all that. Yeah, so
yeah, exactly. But Riley, you ready to talk about Stone Roses?
Yeah.
It's a great album. It is. Don't get me wrong.
It is, and I think if you look at all the small pieces putting it together, you can kind of see why it's my favorite.
Yes,
I had it ready. So like if there was a list of what I would want in an album, and songs, no, if there's a list for exactly what I want in a song, every song on here would check off that list. It would have every single thing on it. It has great hooks, great guitar work, elements of psychedelia. It's like combining all my favorite elements of the Beach Boys and the Beatles with my favorite elements of Pink Floyd and prog and alt rock. It has everything I could want in an album. It has both 60s guitar pop and Pink Floyd jammy sections. It has incredible lyrics, incredible production, and has who I think is easily the most underrated guitarist of all time with John Squire. He was, if you wanted him to do a Jimmy Page guitar solo, he could do it. But if you also wanted him to do a technically precise guitar part like Johnny Marr, he could do it. The guitar textures on this thing are nuts. The songwriting is absolutely incredible. They say they weren't inspired by the 60s. I kind of think that's a lie. It's very much 60s inspired. It's what I think the Beatles would have sounded like if they came out in '89.
Yeah.
I Want to Be Adored is probably the most famous one on here, but it does not represent the album at all for me. It's has the same guitar textures, but melodically it's so dark and gloomy. It doesn't really fit with the rest of the album. But that being said, it's an incredible song. She Bangs the Drums is very much Beatles inspired. It's the "Have you seen or have you heard?" A great hook. Waterfall has an incredible guitar riff. Super catchy. Don't Stop is actually Waterfall reversed.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
the backing track is reversed, and what they did with the lyrics on that one is they kind of took the lyrics from Waterfall, and when they played it backwards, they tried to see what those words sounded like. So that's why it's like a bit more trippy than the rest of the lyrics to Waterfall. Bye Bye Badman is one of the greatest chord progressions I've heard. Super hooky, awesome song. Incredible guitar work throughout that one too, which is for every song. John Squire is kind of like the Ringo of guitar, I would say. He does what the song needs.
He's like an everyman.
Yeah. Elizabeth, My Dear is one of the greatest digs at Queen Elizabeth I've ever heard. It's Scarborough Affair by Simon and Garfunkel, rewritten as like I Can't Wait Till You Die. That aged super well or bad, depending on how you look at it. Song for My Sugar Sponge Sister is like easily the most 60s they've ever sounded. Great chord progression on that one. I love the it's I like the lyrics on that one too, talking about like comparing a girl to a piece of candy. And Made of Stone has one of the greatest hooks. That's like the song I think Oasis was inspired by. Shoot You Down is really cool. Another very 60s sounding one. Very different guitar work compared to the rest of the album. This Is the One is probably my least favorite track next to Don't Stop. But that being said, it's still an 8 out of 10. And I'm pretty sure Manchester United used that as an opening for many years. And I Am the Resurrection is like the perfect song for me because you have great lyrics, great song structure. It goes verse, chorus, or verse, pre-chorus, verse, pre-chorus, verse, pre-chorus, and then finally the chorus is doubled. And I know I told Jake it hit me like a truck the first time I heard it because it comes out of nowhere.
It does.
And then you have like a 5-minute jam section and freak out at the end. That's the actual record. Fool's Gold is tacked on as a bonus track on the digital release. I love Fool's Gold, but it does not belong on the album. It was a great song too. Definitely worth a listen. But yeah, this album is it has everything I could want in an album. Great hooks, great lyrics, very melodic, but also very psychedelic.
I will say that for me, Fool's Gold, I felt it's kind of funky, honestly. Like the coda of that for me was very funky.
It takes it actually, so that was Manchester. That was more like acid house vibe. And if you listen to Turns into Stone, side B is all the acid house stuff they did. Something's Burning, One Love, Fool's Gold's on there too.
Cool, perfect. I was just about to ask you if Fool's Gold was on there. Cool. Well, I will say this, Riley. I listened to it just earlier this week, and for me, I came away from it really enjoying it. But what I will say is that I feel like it's one of those albums that really rewards multiple listenings just because of how textured it is. There's so much going on every track that it's like the first listen for me, I can't even listen to all the parts. There's just so much going on. Like I want to listen to it again to see what I missed the first time. So that was my takeaway from it. I thought it was a very enjoyable listen. I can definitely see why you love that album so much because it's right up your alley. And I quite enjoyed it too myself.
You got to shout out John Leckie for producing this one. If there's anything that Second Coming didn't have, it was one producer. This one is John Leckie produced it. It's very textured. Like you said, the guitar textures on this album are absolutely nuts. Because usually if an album is beefed up with texture, it's usually by keyboards and synths. That is not the case for this one. It is beefed up by different guitar textures, different guitar sounds. You have, I think, like 5 different guitars used all over it. You have the John Squire's Country Gentleman, which is the same guitar George Harrison used for a while. You have a Stratocaster. You have a Hofner guitar, not a Hofner bass, like a Hofner guitar. It's cool. John Squire was kind of like the Edge, except actually really good. Because like instead of just using like 5 delay pedals, he was like a technical mastermind with his guitar pedals and how he put them in certain orders. And he was an art student. Um, he also made the cover, I believe, John Squire.
I believe I read that. Yes, I was like, I think it was supposed to be like a mock-up for like what they thought "Bye Bye Badman" was or something like that.
So yeah, Bye Bye Bad Man, probably the best lyrics on the album. It's about Paris protests that are happening in Paris, and then like the lemon was the logo for the protests, and that's where they got like stoned. They got stones thrown at them. I don't know the entirety of the story, but that was I think John Squire read it somewhere, and then he wrote the song. But if I was to leave the album with like one statement, I would say, and I saw this somewhere else, I'm not sure where I saw it. It's a timeline of British guitar history in terms of.
Yeah, honestly, I could definitely hear that because I kind of feel like listening to it, I kind of hear the 60s and the 70s and the 80s all in like one album. You can hear like the influence of the 60s and 70s, and of course the album itself is from the 80s. So I definitely can hear that.
Yeah, and the guitar solos or the guitar work is probably the best part of it for me. Next
Yeah.
to all the melodies and that, it's Squire, like I said, was like the Ringo of guitar, where like on I'm the Resurrection, after the end of the first chorus, you have a really like short mini solo. And if you look at the technical like way he played that solo, it's absolutely nuts. And I'm still to this day trying to replicate that in my playing because it's like which is like a super melodic solo, not like a basic shred from like Jimmy Page. It's cool. And it's pretty funny considering that he found Led Zeppelin down the line, and then he has this whole like blues rock album, and it sounds nothing like this. Stone Roses are a very interesting history, and if I ever do get to do my own YouTube channel, which is the plan, I will probably do like an hour-long video on the entire history. But
And based on what you told me, it sounds like there was unfortunately a lot of missed potential with them.
long story short, they got fucked by the record company. They their contract was like argued as like the worst recording contract ever, and then when they wanted to back out, they were barred from making music for 5 years.
Really? Ugh.
And that's why Second Coming is as spotty as it is. I think Second Coming is a great album, but a lot of those songs were like piled up over the years and they got bored, and they're also like very media shy. So,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
but
they weren't like the Gallagher brothers who went on TV and had all this charisma.
oh, they had charisma, but like there's like interviews of them where they're asking the interviewer is like asking a dumb question. They're just sitting there like,
No, I know. I mean, it was like the Gallagher brothers just like a trip. Like they just like go off and it's like the funniest shit ever that comes out of their mouth.
yeah. But Stone Roses, very interesting story. Actually, when I'm done reading Heroes and Villains by Stephen Gaines, this is what I plan on reading. I heard this is a great biography.
Oh God,
Sad story, but they had a happy ending. They also had a 2012 reunion and a 2016 one. So there is a happy ending after all.
maybe
And,
maybe they'll have another one and you get a chance
and
to.
Squire just did an album with Liam Gallagher. So
Yes, yes. Justin was talking about that.
yeah,
Okay,
great album. I think it's very melodically, it's great. Lyrically, it's whatever. But Stone Roses, please listen to this. Listen to it at least once.
I agree. I'm going to talk about my final album. So this is an album by an oft maligned band in the past, but I think now they've started to get their flowers. Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Limited by the Monkees. This is a great sunshine pop rock album. I really think there's some really great songs on here, and I think it's a bit of a shame that the Monkees got so much shit because they were on TV or whatever. But this really shows. So this album is this came after Headquarters, which Headquarters was the album where they played all the like most of the instruments. This one's kind of a mix of them and session guys, but the material on here is just so amazing. You open up with Salesman, which is a great kind of little ditty about like drugs and all that stuff, and it has like a lot of great subliminal messages. And the songwriter actually was an Acid Casualty. She Hangs Out. That's a really great kind of like vibey. How old you say your sister was? The Door into Summer, which is a big highlight on this album. That is a gorgeous track, a very haunting song. Love Is Only Sleeping is a really cool, like kind of psychedelic-y song that Mike Nesmith does a great vocal on. Cuddly Toy is a Harry Nilsson song that is another one that's kind of like risque lyrics, you know. You're not the only cuddly toy. That's a fun one that Davey and Mickey go to town on. Words is a great like kind of back and forth between Mickey and Peter. Side two, you open up with Hard to Believe, which is a little syrupy, but it's a pretty good Davey co-write. It's not too bad. What Am I Doing Hanging Around is a great country rock number that Mike sings on. Then you have that Peter Purcell Patterson Pet Pig Peter Tork's thing, but it goes into Pleasant Valley Sunday, which is one of their best songs. That's a great Goffing King number. Daily Nightly is a really cool kind of psychedelic number that so Mickey Dolenz actually bought one of the first Moog synthesizers, and Daily Nightly has it on there, and it's played in it's a very experimental song with how they play the Moog, and I believe Michael Nesmith wrote this song about the Sunset Strip riots. Daily Nightly. Don't Call on Me, very haunting song from Mike, where he wrote that actually with John London before the Monkees started, where it kind of is just like about, you know, like it has like kind of a loungy vibe to it at the beginning, but it's a very haunting piece that has a very stunning vocal from him. And then we end with Star Collector, which is a song about groupies that has the Moog on it too. I think this is a really great album from start to finish, and I think this really shows that the Monkees had some really great material, and I think it's a bit of a shame that critics for a long time didn't give them their due. Like the Rolling Stone album guide gave this a 1.5 stars. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. This is minimum a 4-star album, if not close to a 5-star album. I love this record. I highly recommend it to anyone. I think if you like the Beach Boys and the Beatles, you will really like this album. It is a great record.
Yeah, the Monkees really get a bad rep. First of all, if I remember correctly, and you will correct me on this, most of them were actually musicians before they started.
So Davy Jones was on Broadway. Mike and Peter definitely were. Peter was a dyed-in-the-wool folkie from Greenwich Village, and Mike started in Texas and then also played in the clubs in Hollywood. Mickey had some bands, but Mickey was primarily known as an actor. But yes, they all did have some musical experience before coming in. They weren't just like actors that walked off the street and didn't know what they were.
And Michael Nesmith, I've been kind of getting into him a little bit more. I have always loved Papa Dean Blues. That's actually one of my favorite songs of all time. Great hooks on that one. Very much an experienced guitarist, and I know that he had a lot of frustration in the early years when they didn't have a lot of freedom on what they could do.
Tork too, Peter Tork too.
And I also he had a hit with Linda Ronstadt.
Different drum. Yep, he wrote that song.
So he very much experienced. They got a really bad rep, and I feel like in recent years they've kind of also gotten some more recognition. But like for a while, they were just absolutely shit on, and
they were. I read there's a book about them where they called them rock's first great embarrassment, and I think that kind of says it the best. It's because they had that TV show, and people just thought like, and it's true that in the early days they didn't play their own instruments, and they didn't write too much material. Only Nesmith was allowed to write material. He was allowed 2 songs on each album, but they really did have a lot of talent. And Peter Tork was quite the accomplished multi-instrumentalist. Like he could play anything. I don't know if you've ever heard him play banjo, but he was an incredible banjo player. I mean, he was like a dyed-in-the-wool folkie. He was living in Greenwich Village with Mama Cass and Stephen Stills. He was really good friends with Stephen Stills. So like he had chops. Like it wasn't like he was just like some pretty boy that walked off the street that they cast in a show. And I just think that it's a bit of a shame because of the popularity of the show and because you know, the Brits hated them too because the Brits called them like an embarrassment to like the genius of the Beatles or something like that. But I think it's really a shame. But I like that they're starting to get more recognition. And Michael Nesmith, not only was he a great country rock pioneer, he also was basically the inventor of MTV. And we all see how MTV impacted, for better and worse. We can all see how MTV impacted the music industry. There's a lot of artists that would never would have gone very far without MTV. Look at Madonna, for example. And I like some of her stuff. She never would have had a career without MTV. I don't think it's wrong for me to say that because she was so much of a vocalist.
I mean, say what you will, that they're like pre-made band, like industry plants, whatever. I mean, they still had a lot more honest talent and capabilities, and just they're way better than a lot of modern artists. I'll be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, like, they're even better than some artists from the '60s that are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like the Dave Clark Five.
Yeah, I do think there are some parallels between, not exactly, but there are some parallels between them and like the Beach Boys in terms of like the image versus like if you actually like read more about them and learn more about them, like there's this whole other side of them. Like you think of like that album they did, Head, some of this later '60s like more psychedelic stuff that they were doing. It's like most people that just like casually know the Monkees don't know this stuff even exists. Or they just view them as, like you guys were saying, just like a made-for-TV act, like the Partridge Family. It's like there's so much more than that, though. And like you said, they were all accomplished musicians, especially Michael and Peter. So
yeah, and especially since like there were so many artists that were industry plants before them that had songs written for them. It doesn't like once these guys come on, like how are they any different?
And what I really give them a lot of credit for is that Mike and Peter fought to become a real band, and they did become a real band, and that's
Mhm.
something. Honestly, that's about as punk rock as it gets when you think about it. It really is. They became their own band, and they did a pretty damn good job with Headquarters. I would say Headquarters is their second best album. It's a great album. I don't think it's quite as good as Pisces, 'cause I don't think the material is quite as strong, but honestly, I would say that all of their albums from the debut up through Head are all really good albums. They're great pop rock albums. Not every song is a winner, but there's enough good material that there's so much enjoyable stuff. After that, they get a little spotty. But like I said, the run from the debut through Head, so it's like the debut, More of the Monkeys, Headquarters, Pisces, Birds, Bees, and the Monkeys, and Head. There's so much great material on there. I mean, like some artists would kill to have some of that material in their discography because of how good it was.
To our listeners, make sure you skip The Day We Fall in Love, and
That's horrible. Gonna
yeah,
buy me a dog.
gonna buy me a dog.
Yeah, no, there. Like I said, not everything is a winner, but there's enough. I mean, because like at the end, you look at More of the Monkeys, that also has "I'm Not Your Stepping Stone" and "I'm a Believer" and "The Kind of Girl I Could Love" and like "She" and like some really great material on there. Here, Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow is another great song.
Which album has Valerie?
That is on Birds. Birds has some great. That has Tapioca Tundra and Daydream Believer.
Great songs, all great,
Great
all
songs,
three of them.
all great songs. So, Jake, what's your final one?
So my 10th and final album on my list. This is another album from 1979. It's Supertramp's "Breakfast in America." This is one of my favorite progressive pop albums, I guess you could call it. I think it's progressive pop at its best, from start to finish. Roger Hodgson and Rick Davies are just unbelievable songwriters, and they really show their strengths as songwriters on this album. You have so many hits on here. It's honestly almost like a greatest hits album. It's incredible how many like amazing songs are on here. You have the Logical Song by Roger, which is one of their most well-known songs and one of their best in my opinion. Goodbye Stranger, which I would say is Rick Davies' best song. Breakfast in America, the title track. Take the Long Way Home, which is a track I really like with that kind of haunting harmonica at the start. Really pretty song. Lord Is It Mine, beautiful ballad by Roger. I think this one deserves a lot more attention. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. Casual Conversations is a kind of more mellow, laid back, kind of like bluesy sounding piece by Rick that I really like. Then Child of Vision at the end is a great closer. Probably one of the more proggy sounding songs that I really like, honestly. It's got this really long extended keyboard solo at the end played by Rick. And I really like this track a lot. And I will take Child of Vision any day over Child of Winter. Yeah, overall, this is a great album. Breakfast in America, near flawless. I mean, there may be one track I'm not too fond of, but besides that, I think it's a near flawless album. I'm a pretty big Supertramp fan, but I have to say, for me, it's no contest that this is their best album. I think that they come close with some other albums. They do have some really strong tracks on albums like Crime of the Century, Crisis What Crisis, albums like that. But this one, in my opinion, is their most consistent start to finish. So Supertramp Breakfast in America is my final album.
I will say this though, for the longest time, I actually thought it was a shot of New York. Not until I looked closer at it, I realized it was like New York made out of like
breakfast food and
food and like utensils and stuff, which I thought was very cool. I really loved the cover.
Goodbye Stranger is one of the best songs ever written.
I agree.
I know you don't call them prog, and because they're a bit more melodic, but I consider them and ELO both prog rock. Maybe not like prog rock in the sense of Yes or Pink Floyd, but they have the elements of prog rock, of pressing rock music forward using different production techniques, jazzy. They're like kind of like Steely Dan, maybe in the sense like they're including a lot of jazz. Like if you look at the chords for Goodbye Stranger, it's absolutely nuts. Which has one of, if not the best hook of a song ever written. Goodbye Stranger. It's been nice.
And I should also highlight too, I mean, all the Supertramp albums are really well produced, but like this one too in particular. I mean, the whole album. I mean, these are the kinds of albums where like if you want to test like a speaker system and see how great it sounds, these are the albums you use. I know this one, I think Crime of the Century has been cited as an album that like if you want to like test out a speaker system, see how it sounds, you use these albums because they are just really well produced records and like there's a lot going on. Like these are albums that really do reward repeated listening. So
there was a MoFi press of this too. I think it's out of print now, so outrageous.
There's that picture disc one we were talking about.
Picture discs are just awful. Okay, so for the honorable mentions, do you guys just want to go instead of doing a round robin? How about we just each go?
Let's just do a list. Yeah.
Okay.
How many honorable mentions are we doing?
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6. I think Jake said 5 to 7 is good.
You can do as many as you want because I'll admit I went a little over my number, but I'm also going to run through them very quickly.
I'm going to run through them really quickly too. I ain't going to spend a shit ton.
I'll do one set. I'll do one set. You might have to circle back to me because I do have a list. I have quite a few. Of the ones I have right in front of me, Is This It by The Strokes. Very similar in the not in production to New Abnormal, but in the place of that rock music is still evolving. It's a great pop rock album. David Bowie's Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. Maybe not my top, maybe not my favorite Bowie album. But that being said, it is pretty much a blend of all of Bowie's styles up to that point.
Yep.
It's both post-punk, but you can also hear parts of Ziggy in it. You can hear Aladdin Sane in it. You can hear a little bit of Young Americans in it, and you can also hear a lot of what he did with Low in the Berlin trilogy. So it's kind of like a weird Bowie career spanning album that came out in 1980, and it also at the same time was a precursor to Let's Dance. I love that one. Lots of different styles. Oasis is definitely maybe. Say what you will about them being derivative. Say what you will about them trying to be Beatles ripoffs. It's still great songwriting. And if you look at like the stuff that they ripped off, it was like you're really nitpicking at some of that shit. I'm sorry. Like it's easy to hate on Oasis, but Cigarettes and Alcohol fucking rips. Supersonic rips. Married with Children is one of the best stripped back songs I've ever heard. And Live Forever is one of the greatest power ballads ever written.
And I just think a quick thing about Oasis. I think the reason why they get ripped on so much is because you have to admit the Gallagher brothers are very mouthy, and I think that turns.
Yeah, but they're funny as shit.
They are funny, but they're mouthy. But also, to be fair, everything's derivative of something, so who cares?
Right, and it's like, sure, does it sound like Bang and Gong a little bit? But like, it's not the thing that carries the song at all. It's Liam Gallagher's energetic vocals. And like Live Forever, say what you will. It's like 3 chords, sure, but it's fucking incredible. It's like if they're not ripping something off, they're too simplistic. And if they're not too simplistic, they're ripping somebody off. It's like, dude, just like if you hate them, that's fine. But
they also got
fucking rips.
They also got shit on a lot because they were working class and unashamedly working class, and the British media is very classist.
Yeah. And On the Train with Oasis, I do not have a copy of this album. Or the other one that I was going to go along with it. Blur's Park Life is one of my favorites. And Blur's Self-Titled is kind of like their White Album. I love that album so much. If you like the White Album, you need to listen to it because it's nothing like Blur did up to that point. And it's very much rootsy rock, great chord progressions. It's almost like forward thinking because it sounds like a 2020 indie album to me. So I would definitely listen to the Self-Titled by Blur. If you're trying to get into them, if you're already into them and you can listen to some unapologetically British music, listen to Park Life. Combat Rock by The Clash, besides Rock the Casbah and Should I Stay or Should I Go, there are some awesome new wavy inspired jams. It is I can't give a genre to it. And I think it's similar to what I said with London Calling. It's just them pushing punk even more into its own separate genre. It's super unique sounding record. Hear a lot of Caribbean music influence on it too, but you also hear some great guitar work. Inoculated City sounds like it could have come out this year. Car Jam, super hooky. Red Angel Dragnet is one of the most fun songs I've ever listened to. It's kind of about Taxi Driver. Straight to Hell is probably my highlight. Straight to Hell has been sampled for another song. I forgot what it was, but definitely listen to it. Very fun album. Definitely worth a listen. I would say it is about like a tier below London Calling, but you're also a tier below one of the top 10 albums of all time. And then the last one I'll talk about for now is The Cars, Self-Titled.
That's a great album. Great album.
It's a greatest hits album without being a greatest hits album. You've probably heard at least 7 out of the 10 songs on it on radio. And even the ones you haven't heard on radio, good as great songs. Just What I Needed is probably my highlight, but Best Friends Girl is also great. Moving in Stereo is awesome.
Oh yeah,
love that song. I will say Rick Ocasek, very underrated songwriter. I mean, honestly, like I would argue he's like probably like close to a genius.
Yeah, I think this one was so good that the next couple weren't really allowed to be as good. It's hard it's like sophomore slump. You come off like a great debut as classic as this. I think Heartbeat City is also worth a listen. That is a great mid-period album from them. But Rick Ocasek, great pop songwriter. You're All I've Got Tonight's also great. It's a great guitar pop album.
It is. And I love
I
the
have to
cover.
find some more honorable mentions, but you guys can go ahead.
As I love the cover too. Okay, do you guys want me to start with the highbrow stuff or the lowbrow stuff? Because mine's a mix of both.
Dude, I just went random.
All right, let's just start from the pile. Okay, first thing is I haven't listened to too much Beatles solo stuff, but I do love McCartney's Cherry album or the McCartney 1 album. I love the lo-fi vibe of it. I love that it's almost kind of like half baked, but it's very charming. It's got some great melodies on it. That Would Be Something is a great song. Every Night is a great song. Man, We Was Lonely. Junk is gorgeous. Mama Miss America or Teddy Boy is just moving. Maybe I'm Amazed is a classic. And even the instrumentals I quite enjoy. So I know that this is an album that was very maligned when it came out, but I really think it's an album that was very ahead of its time. It kind of was like an early lo-fi record. And I think that it's an album that I think this and McCartney 2 are now much more appreciated than they were at the time. Because I know at the time people hated them. They thought like the worst things ever made. I haven't listened to too much. Again, I haven't listened to much Beatles solo stuff, but I really do enjoy this album. David Bowie's Hunky Dory is my other favorite Bowie album. A lot of people say this is one of Bowie's first great albums, and I do quite like Man Who Sold the World, but I wouldn't argue if someone said this is his first really great album. I would say this is where his songwriting really started to blossom. This is a very piano-driven album, which was like the first one of him that was very piano-driven. Changes is a classic. Oh, You Pretty Things is another one of those great songs. That's a very upbeat song with very like disturbing, lyrics. Eight-line poem is just Bowie being poetic. Life on Mars is one of the greatest songs ever written. Full stop. Kooks is a very pretty song he wrote for his son Duncan. Quicksand is a very haunting piece that kind of like is about like an existential crisis. Fill Your Heart is a great Biff Rose cover. Andy Warhol is kind of him being a little bit more like kind of like folky. Same thing with Song for Bob Dylan. I love that song. And then we have Queen Bitch, which is the Velvet Underground homage. And then the Bewley Brothers, which is a very haunting song about his brother that suffers from schizophrenia. Prince's Parade. So this was the first time I got on vinyl. I could choose a lot of Prince records. This one I think is very underrated. This is his more like Baroque album. This was the last album he made with The Revolution. This album opens with like a 4-song suite. Let me just get the record out. A 4-song suite of Christopher Tracy's Parade, New Position, I Wonder You, and Under the Cherry Moon, and they all blend together very well. They're very Baroque, very melodic. So if you really like a lot of that Baroque stuff, I think you'd really like it. I Wonder You is pretty cool because Wendy and Lisa sing the lead on it, not Prince. Then you have Girls and Boys, which is a great funky number where he kind of throws in like the horns. That's very melodic and the Baroque stuff. Again, Life Can Be So Nice, great tune. Venus de Milo is an instrumental. You flip it over. Mountains is one of his most underrated songs. Do You Lie, a great, you got the kind of Baroque stuff again. There's some French stuff in there. Then you have Kiss, which is arguably the greatest song Prince ever wrote. I will say that Kiss is probably a masterpiece in minimalism. It's a song that's so good. People have been trying to replicate it for 40 years almost and haven't come close. And then you have Another Lover Hole in Your Head, which is fine. And then Sometimes It Snows in April, which is a very, very, one of the probably the saddest songs Prince ever wrote. Basically about the death of a friend and comparing it to how it snows in April. It's unexpected. And here's what's really scary. Prince recorded it 30 years to the day before he died or something like that. I'm not even joking. Very haunting number. I'll do one last highbrow one, then we'll get to the lowbrow stuff. Velvet Underground and Nico. This is an album I just recently really started getting into, and it's another one that is so loved for a reason because this is probably one of the first albums that really meshed rock with the avant-garde. You have Lou Reed and John Cale really doing their thing on it. And just the different songs in here. Sunday Morning is a great dream pop song. I'm Waiting for the Man has one of the greatest riffs ever. I mean, seriously. Femme Fatale, another great dream pop song. Venus and Furs is a very like, almost like proto-punk, like I am tired, I am weary. Run, Run, Run is kind of has like a nice little funky vibe to it. All Tomorrow's Parties is a very haunting one from Nico. Heroin honestly feels like you're on heroin. It just has this rush to it. There She Goes Again is another one that's kind of like doo-woppy, like There She Goes Again. I'll Be Your Mirror, another beautiful dream pop song. The Black Angels Death Song, that's a fun one with John Cale's electric viola. Apparently, according to Lou Reed, they used to play that one when the clubs wanted them out for the night. And then European Sun. So if you guys, if the viewers have listened to this, there's a reason this album is as acclaimed as it is. Now we'll get to the lowbrow stuff. NSYNC Celebrity. You guys know this. I love NSYNC. Yeah. This was one of the first groups I got into because of my sister when I was young. And let me tell you something. They're another band that was kind of unfairly maligned because they're a boy band, whatever. But they formed themselves. They knew how to play instruments. They actually fought to get their name back from their evil manager, whatever. This album kind of meshes pop with a lot of the two-step kind of electro pop stuff that was going on. I would say the highlight on this is probably a song called The Two of Us, which meshes kind of like a Sgt. Pepper's-esque riff with a two-step beat with so two-step garage, in case anybody is not familiar. That was like what Craig David was really big into. And lyrics that are kind of like risque, like, you know, waiting for your call tonight, we're going to do it all. And most of this album was written by Justin Timberlake and JC Chazé. And fun fact, no greater authority than Enemy Magazine gave this an 8 out of 10. So that's pretty awesome as far as I'm concerned. And finally, there's another one that's kind of lowbrow, but it's one that means a lot to me. Christina Aguilera's Stripped. This is an album when she started taking creative control of her career. She started writing her own material, and really she explored a lot of the trauma she went through in her childhood. There's songs about her abusive father on here. There's songs about the insecurity she felt. Fighter is a great song on here. Can't Hold Us Down talks about the double standards that women face. Beautiful is on here, which I know, Jake, you said is a very moving song for you. It's a really good. It's a little long, but I really like that. There's a lot of experimentation with the genres on here. You got like kind of the pop rock with Fighter. You have the Latin infusion with Infatuation. You got the R&B with Love and Me for Me. You got this beautiful Alicia Keys song called Impossible. You got some of the hip hop stuff with Dirty, which has a very hot video, by the way. So this is one that meant a lot to me, that got me through some really tough times in middle school. And yeah, so that's my rundown. And you can see I mixed the highbrow with the lowbrow. I wasn't kidding, right?
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to run through my list pretty quick here because I wrote down quite a few. Some of these we've already kind of mentioned in passing, so I'll just go through those real quick. So for the Beatles, obviously, I mentioned that I love a lot of their albums, but the other two that I hinted at that I also like just about as much as Abbey Road, I really love Sgt. Pepper. I think it's a great album, start to finish, with a couple of exceptions. There's a couple tracks, like I'm not the biggest fan of Within You Without You either, Matt. I don't think I hate it like you do, but I'm not particularly fond of it. But I do think there's a lot of really great stuff on there. Like She's Leaving Home, Fixing a Hole, a lot of really great tracks. The White Album, I think, is really great. Yes, there are some tracks in there that kind of feel like filler, but I think as one of you guys, I think maybe Riley said, I almost feel like the rest of the tracks are almost like elevated by that. So I do enjoy the album for the most part as a whole. So I do really like that one. From Paul McCartney, Ram, I think, is a really great record. Again, don't like every song, but the songs I do really like, I really love. You have songs like Backseat of My Car. Just a lot of really great tracks on there. Wings Over America, excellent live album. Definitely one of the most essential Paul McCartney albums if you're looking to get into Paul. ELO, I could honestly mention any other albums from 1974 through 1981 because it's just an incredible run of albums. It's pretty much from El Dorado, 1974. Then you have Face the Music, New World Record, Out of the Blue, which I already talked about, Discovery, and then Time. All these albums are really great in my opinion. I think Time is a really great synth pop album. In progressive synth pop album. If I had to pick one other album that I recommend our listeners to check out, besides Out of the Blue, I would probably say Time. But you really can't go wrong with any of those, in my opinion. Arrival by ABBA is a really great pop album as well. I don't think it's quite as strong as Voulez-Vous, but I do think there's a lot of great tracks on there. It has Dancing Queen. It also has Knowing Me, Knowing You, and quite a few other songs that a lot of people might know. Todd Rundgren's Something Anything is a really great dump. I don't love every track on it, I will admit, but there are quite a few tracks that I think are excellent. Obviously, you have Hello, It's Me, Couldn't I Just Tell You, I Saw the Light, and then some really cool deep cuts like the Torch song. Quite a few really great tracks on there. Really like that album a lot. The other Tom Petty album that I mentioned really liking is Full Moon Fever. This one's got some of his biggest hits on there. It's got Free Fallin', Won't Back Down, You're So Bad. I personally really love the song A Face in the Crowd. It's one of my favorite Tom Petty songs, produced by Jeff Lynne, very kind of haunting vibe to it. But I really like that one a lot. Really great album. It does kind of fall off a little bit at the very end. There's a couple of tracks at the end I'm not particularly that fond of, but I think for the most part, it's a really strong track or strong album. From George Harrison, I already mentioned All Things Must Pass and Living in the Material World. Really enjoy both of those albums a lot. Really great highlights on them. On All Things Must Pass, you obviously have My Sweet Lord. The title track is just gorgeous. What Is Life? Hear Me, Lord. Beware of Darkness. Just ton of really just gorgeous songs. Living in the Material World. Were a lot of great songs in there as well. Obviously, is it quite as good as All Things Must Pass? No, but there's still a lot of really great tracks on there. Give Me Love is definitely my favorite. From Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon is an excellent album from start to finish. It's definitely my favorite Pink Floyd album, and I think it deserves all the acclaim that it gets. A couple of power pop albums I want to mention because I'm a big power pop fan. Badfinger put out an album in 1974 called Wish You Were Here. That is a really great record. They're another example of a band that got completely fucked over by their record label. In their case, it was their manager. And that resulted in Pete Ham killing himself, unfortunately. But it was a really great album, really great power pop album from start to finish. A lot of really great tracks on there. If you're looking to get into Badfinger, it's definitely a great album to start with, along with a couple of their others from around that time. From the Raspberries, which are one of my favorite power pop bands, Starting Over from 1974 is a really great album. A lot of different styles on here. You got some straight up rock and roll tracks. You have some really pretty ballads. Overnight Sensation is an absolutely beautiful song. Starting Over, the title track, Rose Colored Glasses, and then some really great power pop tracks like Play On. Just it's a really great album. And then lastly, the most recent album on my list, the Lemon Twigs, Everything Harmony. I think it's a really great album. The Lemon Twigs, I feel, are a great example of a band that is taking some influence from 60s and 70s bands, but then also making it their own. I really love this album a lot. You can tell, you can definitely hear the influence of the bands that they listen to, but yet they make it their own. And some just absolutely gorgeous songs on this album. Any Time of Day, Corner of My Eye, What You Were Doing. It's just a phenomenal album. I do like their most recent album quite a bit as well. Yeah. But if I had to pick one, I probably would lean Everything Harmony. So overall, those are the albums that I would say are my honorable mentions. One other one I wanted to quickly mention I didn't write down. I also like 33 1/3 by George Harrison quite a bit. I think that's kind of an underrated album. So that's it for me.
A couple more. If I was to pick a Twigs album, it'd probably be this one, the newer one. It's just I like the production on this one, at least the style of it, more than Everything Harmony. But
yeah,
maybe it's just recency bias. What You Are Doing that bridge needs to be sprinkled out throughout the song a little bit more. That should have been the chorus.
Yeah, I agree.
By the Police.
Nice.
It's a great 80s pop album. Very forward thinking by them. You obviously have the Every Breath You Take.
One of the greatest.
Another song as good as it is. This played a lot, but this is great. But King of Pain's awesome, Wrapped Around Your Finger. Synchronicity 2 is actually one of my favorites too. Tea in the Sahara is pretty solid, but the Police are one of those bands, like, they're in between greatest hits and an album. They're like perfectly in between.
Mm-hmm.
Their debut is also really cool. I want to talk a little bit about Zeppelin. House of the Holy is, a lot of people are like, oh, Led Zeppelin, they just stole a bunch of songs, and like then you look at House of the Holy and it's like, can't really say the same thing about this one. It's, I think, again, one of those albums that is a culmination of what they were doing before, all put together. You have the mellowness of Zeppelin 3. You have some of the hard rock of Zeppelin 1 and 2 and 4. The Rain song is one of the prettiest songs ever written. And I also wanted to shout out In Through the Outdoor by Zeppelin. It's very much a John Paul Jones record compared to everything that came before, which is a lot of Jimmy Page stuff. I love the synth work on it. I'm Gonna Crawl is such an underrated gem in the catalog. I think Jake would love that one. You have a little bit of R&B influence on that song. Curse Alhambra is John Paul Jones's Stairway to Heaven. Lots of shit going on that one. Fool in the Rain is a great pop song. A lot of people shit on Zeppelin for going a little bit softer and synth heavy. I think that it was an incredible album.
That's one of their last albums, right?
It was their last real studio album,
including Coda. Yeah.
Yeah. Other ones I want to mention around, obviously a lot of Pink Floyd's catalog, because if I included more than The Wall on the list, it would be pretty Pink Floyd heavy. The big four obviously are great, from Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall. Obscured by Clouds, though, incredible album. That I think that's their FM radio album, where it's like they weren't trying to make a Dark Side, they were just making a bunch of songs for a soundtrack, and it's absolutely incredible. What's All the Deal is an incredible song. Presenting the Fabulous Ronettes. I think Spectre wasn't trying to go for a cohesive, incredible album, but he made one. Although Nate could probably correct me on that. Sound Effects by The Jam. I think I mentioned that one before. Run Around Sue by Dion is a surprisingly quality album for something that came before the album era. I already mentioned the new Abnormal by the Strokes. So Much for the City by The Thrills. Incredible indie rock album that came out in 2001. It's weird because I think I told Jake, it sounds like Holland in terms of production, but it has the chord changes of something that would be found on Beach Boys today. So it's a great album. Folky, but also indie. Great album. Screamadelica. This is one I wanted to talk to. It just missed my list. It's still a bit new in my library, I guess. It sounds like Revolver with tribal drumming It's the best way I can describe it. But you also have like so much like samples and stuff. It's like it's kind of reminds me of hip hop in a lot of ways, but it's acid house is the best way to. It's acid house album. It's danceable. You have a lot of samples.
Yeah, no.
You have an incredible cover of "Slip Inside This House" that blows the original out of the fucking water. Bobby Gillespie was a Beach Boys fan. He has credited Pet Sounds as a big influence, and it's like if Pet Sounds met dance music is the best way I can describe it. It's incredible. Matt likes it.
Matt really liked it. I liked it a lot, Riley. That was a great recommendation from you.
Yeah, so Screamadelica by Primal Scream. And the last one I wanted to say before I shut up is Ogden's Nut Gone Flake by the Small Faces. Small Faces are, if you take away this album, I guess you could say are a singles band. But this album is incredible. It's blues rock meets baroque in some spots. It's Steve Marriott was an incredible singer. Side one has incredible rock songs, and side two is a mini rock opera about a person trying to find the other side of the moon. And it's the most British sounding album I've listened to ever.
Well, that's saying something because you like a lot of that British stuff.
Fuck, I forgot to mention also Zombies, Odyssey, and Oracle. I think that's the British answer to Pet Sounds. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
One last thing, I just want to go back to this for a second because I feel like I skipped over some other songs on here. So the big hits on here were Pop, which is like the dirty pop song, which is kind of like a glitch pop thing that was produced by BT. Girlfriend, which is a great Neptunes tune, and then Gone, which is a pretty ballad. Other highlights on here, The Game Is Over is a really cool song with a Pac-Man sample. Up Against the Wall is another great two-step number. Selfish is a really, really pretty ballad. See Right Through You is a great like pissed off anthem. I don't really care for Something Like You, but it does have a Stevie Wonder harmonica solo if anybody's interested in that. But I really think this is a really great pop album that, again, coming from a group that was often maligned because they were a boy band, but truthfully had some talent in them. So, and I actually think the cover is kind of Sgt. Pepper's-esque. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that, but I kind of see it with the surrealism. And it's also a gatefold, Riley, your favorite.
Fucking love gatefolds. They're so cool. Jake, you have any extras you want to mention?
Off the top of my head, no. I would just say to our listeners, listen to those ELO albums from 1974 through 1981, because I think you're wrong with any of them.
I feel like our listeners have a wide variety of stuff that is like all over the place, that you can really see how some of our taste is really all over the map.
Yeah.
I mean, my taste is, I will freely admit, my taste is all, I joke that my taste meshes the highbrow with the lowbrow.
I will also say, listen to the outtakes from Somewhere in England by George Harrison, because they're better than like over half the shit that made the album. So
listen to Piper of the Gates of Dawn. I love that one. That's one I wanted to mention too. But if I start going down the Pink Floyd rabbit hole, I won't shut up.
Well, I tried to not talk too much because I could have pulled out like a bunch of catalog. I was just like, no, let's just keep it quick.
Where would your Beach Boys albums rank? I mean, if you're doing one per band, where would your Beach Boys album rank?
Well, I wouldn't rank them, but the one I would pick is, I kind of have to pick Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
But honestly, now that I'm thinking about it now, I probably would pick Heartland, honestly, because I think Heartland has grown on me so much. Just because, like, I really think, and I told this to Jake in the chat, that I honestly think on some days Heartland is probably their most cohesive album, honestly, because I don't think
I've been saying.
I don't think there's a bad cut on Heartland. Pet Sounds, I do like Pet Sounds a lot, but I think I may have overplayed it a bit. And I think the other problem is I'm not as fond on the instrumentals as I know you are, Riley. Whereas like Heartland, for me, from start to finish, I don't think there's a wasted second on it, honestly. I think it's just from start to finish a great record.
I had Beach Boys today. So my top 3 I did was London Calling, The Wall, and Stone Roses. Today would be my number 3 favorite album.
What gets knocked out?
Okay, my actual top 10
is Layla.
Because I had the because you took away Layla from me.
Well, that's why I let you talk about it, because I knew it's you.
I had Cafe Blue. I'm just gonna go in any order because I ranked them like I'll say Stone Roses, The Wall, Beach Boys Today, London Calling, Rubber Soul / Revolver, The Who, Sell Out, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, The New Abnormal, This Year's Model, and Cafe Blue. The 2 extras, I actually forgot about the Birds one, so I kind of misranked it. The 2 extras was the Birds one and Bridge Over Triple Water.
Okay, nice. And then
I would probably, for Beach Boys, if I could pick one, again, I didn't rank my list, so I don't know if I'm going to rank it here, but I would put Sunflower on. Just because it's my personal favorite, I would say. On another day, I might say Love You, and on another day, I might say Pet Sounds. Those are probably the 3 that would be in contention. But like, I'm not going to say I would bump anything because honestly, like if I was genuinely making a top 10, this wouldn't even be my top 10 just because I would have a lot of repeating artists on there. So, but all these albums that I've talked about today would definitely be within my top 20, top 25. So yeah.
Honestly, for me, it's like you asked me the day, I'm going to give you something else. I just like too much stuff.
Yeah.
And I have to rank it.
That's why I didn't even bother ranking them because like I'll rewatch this at some point and be like, no, that's wrong. Like move that up, you know? So yeah.
I'm probably gonna change this list within the next week. Pink Flag by Wire. That one too.
You can say Pink Floyd again. I'm like, I think you've talked enough about Pink Floyd. No, I get it. Pink Floyd's great. It's just I think especially me being on the spectrum, if there's an artist I really like, I get so into that artist. I know all the lore, and it's to the point that it's very sad. And
wait till you got into Pink Floyd.
I don't even know if I want to get into Pink Floyd. I was like joking with Jake earlier, like I know, and we can cut this out. Like I know all the lore about the Beach Boys. I know all the lore about David Bowie. I know all the lore about fucking NSYNC. It's just crazy.
If any of our listeners want to enhance their listening experience in case they're like struggling with one of these albums we've mentioned, just put on Tortured Poets before it, listen to that in its entirety, and then spin the album we talked about, and you should make your experience more enjoyable, I think. So that would be my recommendation.
God, we keep taking cheap shots at the Tortured Poets department. We're gonna beat that one into the ground.
We already talked about Taylor Swift, so we couldn't just open the floodgates now. Although hopefully we can finally get one episode where we don't mention her once.
Thank you everyone for listening to this first episode of Off Timin'. We hope you all enjoyed the show. It was really interesting to hear you guys talk about some of your favorite bands and albums outside of the Beach Boys. And hopefully our discussion helped introduce some of our listeners to some more great bands and albums. So again, the Good Timin' podcast is currently on break for the summer. We plan to start our second season as soon as August. So there will be a lot more Beach Boys discussion and content on the way soon. So as always, if you like this episode and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. Also, as a reminder, the podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again for listening, everyone, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.